Chapter 955. The giant silver wolf continued. However, my abilities weren't at my current level back then. I was only at the Four Symbols realm back then, so I didn't have the chance to see the Great Solar Buddha personally. My understanding of the Great Solar Buddha came from other clansmen. I heard from my clansmen that the Great Solar Buddha had always been guarding a secret. It was a secret about the old King of Gods. Furthermore, the disappearance of the Great Solar Buddha all these years seemed to have something to do with that matter. As for other matters, I don't know much about them. Lin Yu nodded and threw an elixir over. The giant silver wolf held the elixir in its mouth, and a look of comfort appeared on its face. The black eagle was a little envious when it saw this, but it was too embarrassed to ask for it. After all, it didn't know anything about the Great Solar Buddha at all. At that time, its abilities weren't as high as the giant silver wolf's. It hunted for survival all year round. So how could it have the time to listen to those rumors? Master Qin. At this moment, Platycodon grandiflorum, who was nearby, took the initiative to speak. What's the matter? Lin Yu turned his head to look. I roughly know where the Great Solar Buddha is living in seclusion. Oh, Lin Yu looked interested. Platycodon grandiflorum actually knew where the Great Solar Buddha was. This didn't make sense. One had to know that Lin Yu had already started searching for information about the Great Solar Buddha when he was in the Baima clan. At that time, he hadn't obtained the Elixir King's inheritance yet, so he didn't know anything about the Great Solar Buddha. At that time, with Yuji Kitami's help, he went to the Baima clan's library and searched a few times. However, he didn't find any information about the Great Solar Buddha at all. After the Heavenly Alliance city was established, Lin Yu roped in the four clans through the elixir business. However, after some investigation, Lin Yu discovered that the Baima clan was not the only clan that did not have any information on the Great Solar Boundless Buddha Supreme. The other three clans also did not have any records on him. In terms of strength alone, the Demon region was definitely no match for the four great clans. In terms of age, Platycodon grandiflorum was also no match for the four clan heads. In that case, where did Platycodon grandiflorum obtain information about the Virokana Buddha Supreme? Platycodon grandiflorum seemed to have noticed Lin Yu's confusion and took the initiative to explain. Before I became the Demon Empress, I cultivated all over the primitive continent. I have been to all sorts of places, no matter how safe or remote they were. Once, I accidentally entered a secret realm and felt a very ethereal aura. Even now, I can't forget that aura. I'm sure that even now, I'm no match for the owner of that aura. Even if it's someone in the late stage of the Spirit King realm, I can still fight them. Of course, I don't count people like you. At this point, Platycodon grandiflorum was speechless. Platycodon grandiflorum was certain that Lin Yu was the person with the most exaggerated combat strength she had ever seen. Not only could he defeat her, but he could also beat her to the point where she could not fight back. Therefore, the owner of that aura must be someone above the Spirit King realm. The only person in the primitive continent who is above the Spirit King realm is the Great Solar Boundless Buddha Supreme. Where is it? Lin Yu asked without batting an eyelid. After he ascended the King of Pil's Pagoda, he received a guide that pointed to the location of the Great Solar Boundless Buddha Supreme. However, Lin Yu did not know how large the destination of the guide was. If it was a very vague guide, it would be troublesome to find it. On the other side, Platycodon grandiflorum heard Lin Yu's question and continued to answer. It's roughly in that direction. I need to be nearby to point out the exact location. At the same time, Platycodon grandiflorum pointed to the front. Lin Yu looked in that direction. It was actually the same direction as the guide he received. It seemed that Platycodon grandiflorum had sensed the Great Solar Boundless Buddha Supreme. Furthermore, she knew the exact location of the Great Solar Boundless Buddha Supreme. Bring me to the place where you sensed that aura, Lin Yu said to Platycodon grandiflorum. Since he knew the exact location, he would not miss it. Okay. Platycodon grandiflorum was stunned, then nodded. Although she did not know why Lin Yu wanted to find the Great Solar Boundless Buddha Supreme, she still agreed. After all, according to the status of the monster territory who had submitted to the Heaven Alliance, she was still considered Lin Yu's subordinate. However, the distance this time is not close. I'm afraid I'll have to leave for a while. I want to settle the matters of the monster territory first. Platycodon grandiflorum asked Lin Yu for instructions. Okay, Lin Yu naturally would not reject such a thing. Moreover, the monster territory had submitted to the Heaven Alliance. It would be beneficial for the Heaven Alliance to allow the monster territory to develop steadily. After receiving Lin Yu's approval, Platycodon grandiflorum hurriedly returned to the headquarters of the monster territory. She was prepared to gather her subordinates to settle the matters after she left. As Platycodon grandiflorum usually handed over the matters of the monster territory to her subordinates, she was not too worried about leaving the monster territory this time. Seeing that Platycodon grandiflorum had left, the eagle and wolf also returned to their residence after bidding farewell to Lin Yu. On the other hand, Lin Yu and the rest walked towards the place where they had agreed to go to the monster territory headquarters. There, all the lords craned their necks and looked over. When they saw Lin Yu and the rest walking over, they all stood up excitedly. Master Qin, you're really a god. You can still turn the situation around in such a situation. Yeah, I broke out in a cold sweat when I saw that. Master Qin was facing so many people from the monster territory headquarters, but his expression did not change at all. Master Qin, Baijio, it's great to see that both of you are fine. The lords discussed one after another. Their words were full of admiration for Lin Yu. They did not know that Lin Yu had already conquered Platycodon grandiflorum and the monster territory. Otherwise, they might be crying or laughing. However, Lin Yu was not worried. He did not think that these lords would oppose the Heaven Alliance's commander. After all, when the time came, they would take the elixir and break through realms. There would be no complaints. After some small talk, the lords got ready to return to their respective territories after knowing that Lin Yu and the rest had solved the problem. Although they were surprised that Lin Yu could come out unscathed after kidnapping Platycodon grandiflorum, no one was foolish enough to stand up and ask. Just like that, the lords dispersed. Lin Yu and the rest stayed in a few guest rooms under the guidance of the monster territory headquarters staff. They waited for Platycodon grandiflorum to settle the matters at hand before they went to look for the Virocana Buddha together. It was a quiet night. The next morning, Platycodon grandiflorum came to the guest room to look for Lin Yu. Master Qin, I've arranged everything in the monster territory. We can set off at any time. Platycodon grandiflorum bowed and said respectfully. Ever since she was defeated by Lin Yu and saw Lin Yu's methods, Platycodon grandiflorum's attitude towards Lin Yu changed drastically after she found out that Lin Yu was an Elixir King realm alchemist. She knew that in this world, one could only survive by relying on the strong. Although Lin Yu's current strength could not be considered top-notch, he was still young. At the same time, he had profound attainments in alchemy. Platycodon grandiflorum was certain that Lin Yu would become one of the strongest in the 3 realms and 5 regions in the future. Chapter 956. All right, then go and prepare a warship. It's best if it's an ordinary one. Don't let others recognize us. Lin Yu nodded and instructed. Yes. Platycodon grandiflorum responded softly. Just as she was about to stand up and leave, Lin Yu called out to her. All right. Lin Yu placed his gaze on Platycodon grandiflorum's body and looked her up and down a few times. Platycodon grandiflorum felt Lin Yu's gaze, and her charming face blushed slightly. As the demon empress, no one had ever dared to look at her so openly. However, Platycodon grandiflorum didn't feel disgusted because she couldn't feel a trace of filth from Lin Yu's gaze. It was just a pure and clear gaze. This was completely different from other men. Although the other men didn't dare to look at her directly, they would still secretly look at her with wretched eyes and thought that she didn't notice. After looking at Platycodon grandiflorum's alluring body, Lin Yu frowned. Your figure and aura are too obvious. We still have to pass by a few other regions on this journey. Before we set off, we should disguise ourselves. Otherwise, we will be easily exposed. Platycodon grandiflorum was worthy of being the demon empress. She was originally extremely beautiful, and as the demon empress, her aura became incomparably noble. combined with her original charm, she could attract the attention of any man. Hearing this, Platycodon grandiflorum was stunned. Previously, she thought that Lin Yu was admiring her figure and was secretly delighted. However, she didn't expect that Lin Yu was actually concerned about whether her appearance would attract attention and expose them. Platycodon grandiflorum pursed her delicate red lips and said unwillingly, "I understand," and Lin Yu nodded and waved his hand. "Quickly go and prepare. We will set off today." Yes. Platycodon grandiflorum left Lin Yu's guest room with a bitter expression and a sense of defeat in her heart. Could it be that her charm wasn't as strong as she imagined? Otherwise, why wasn't Lin Yu moved at all? After thinking for a long time, Platycodon grandiflorum still couldn't understand. She snorted and then ordered her subordinates to prepare a warship while she returned to the main hall to disguise herself. In the guest room, Lin Yu looked at Yuji Kitami, who appeared at the door, and asked with some doubt, "What's wrong?" Not long after she left, she was to appear in front of his door, her like a cat that's smelling a fishy smell, and immediately, she, and her. Beimayu stood by the door and sniffed. With a suspicious look, she said, "There's a woman's smell in your house." "How is that?" Lin Yu spread his hands and said with an innocent face, "Definitely, and I can smell it. It's Platycodon grandiflorum's." Yuji Kitami continued to sniff a few more times with a look of certainty. "You must be a cat." Lin Yu was a little surprised. She could determine a person's identity just by smell. And it was in a situation where that person had already left. "But she just came to tell me that the matters in the demon realm have been settled and that we can set off today." "Really? She didn't do anything else?" Yuji Kitami pouted and was a little unhappy. Of course, she knew that there was nothing between Lin Yu and Platycodon grandiflorum, because she happened to be nearby when Platycodon grandiflorum came in. The reason why Yuji Kitami was in a bad mood was because she knew that the following journey would not be just the three of them. Lin Yu wanted to bring Platycodon grandiflorum along, so that her two-person world would be gone. "It's true." Lin Yu nodded. "I don't believe it." But Yuji Kitami was obviously not satisfied with this answer. She quietly closed the door of the guest room and walked towards Lin Yu. "Unless you let me check." 3 hours later, Lin Yu pushed open the door, walked out of the guest room, and tidied up his clothes. "Did you reply?" Lin Yu asked with a smile on his face. "Yes." A soft voice came from behind Lin Yu. Yuji Kitami walked out of the guest room with a red face. There were still wrinkles on her clothes that she had not had time to tidy up. She had overestimated her strength once again. A maid who was guarding outside the guest room saw the two of them come out, quickly walked over, and said with a lowered head, "Master Qin, the Demon Empress asked me to tell you that everything is ready." "Yes." Lin Yu nodded and walked out. Yuji Kitami saw this and quickly followed while tidying up her clothes. Only when Lin Yu had already turned around did the maid slowly look up. "A full 6 hours. Master Qin is really too brave." The maid looked over with envy. Thinking about the commotion she heard just now, her face could not help but blush a little. Lin Yu and Yuji Kitami were led by a steward to Platycodon grandiflorum. Beside her was an unremarkable warship. It was also very small and could only hold a few people. Alliance Master Baijio had also arrived. When he saw Lin Yu, he hurriedly called out. Platycodon grandiflorum looked at Lin Yu and Yu Lily with a slightly strange expression. This was because the warship had not just been prepared. It had already been prepared 2 hours ago. However, the person she sent to inform Lin Yu came back and told her that Lin Yu was busy. He even stammered when he spoke. Platycodon grandiflorum was curious and took the initiative to look for him. The result was obvious. Although Platycodon grandiflorum had never experienced it before, she had never seen a pig run. As soon as she arrived in front of the door, she immediately understood. Shameless. Looking at Lin Yu and Yu Lily, Platycodon grandiflorum gently spat. Lin Yu also noticed Platycodon grandiflorum at this time. He walked over and said indifferently, "Your disguise is not bad. You have also restrained your aura. It would be better if you could disguise yourself a little uglier. It would save you trouble." Hearing Lin Yu's words, Platycodon grandiflorum's nose became crooked from anger. She had already disguised herself a lot. It was basically impossible to see her original appearance, but Lin Yu was still not satisfied. Make her disguise uglier. Your lover is also so beautiful. Why don't you make her disguise herself too? Platycodon grandiflorum secretly said in her heart, but she did not dare to say this sentence out loud. Got it, Platycodon grandiflorum said unhappily. Lin Yu smiled faintly and then walked onto the warship. Seeing this, the rest of the people followed. Soon, everyone passed through the passage and walked into the warship. There was nothing special about the interior of the warship. It matched its ordinary appearance. Clearly, after Lin Yu's reminder, Platycodon grandiflorum chose the most ordinary warship. There was nothing special about it. After all, the weakest among them was at the 10,000 soul realm. If it was an enemy that could threaten them, their strength could be imagined. Against such an enemy, even if they took out the strongest warship in the demon region, it would not be able to stop them. Platycodon grandiflorum walked into the control room and operated for a while. Master Qin, I have already set the approximate route. However, although this route is the shortest and has the most people, we will need to pass through the territories of several other regions. A projection shone out from the control room. It showed the region of the entire primitive continent and the route of the warship. From the projection, it could be seen that if they followed this route, they would first pass through the western region and then the Dongxing Dao region. Although the western region and the Dongxing Dao region had directions in their names, they were actually connected. The east and west were only for the two. Okay, Lin Yu nodded. Chapter 9, 57. Then let's follow this route. Lin Yu did not think for too long before deciding. Although he did not have a deep understanding of the geography of the primitive continent, he could tell from the projected map that if they chose to take a detour, they would need to travel a far longer distance than this route. Secondly, although this route passed through the territories of other regions, it seemed easy to expose their whereabouts. However, there were many people taking this route, so they could hide their identities. On the other hand, taking a detour and choosing a more remote route would make it easier for people to notice them. Since Lin Yu had already made this decision, Yuji Kidami and Baijio naturally had no intention of objecting. All the decisions that Lin Yu had made until now could be said to have the best outcome. This also made the two of them believe in Lin Yu's judgment without a doubt. Okay, Platycodon grandiflorum replied and returned to the control room. Not long after, they felt the vibration of the warship as it started moving. The warship had already left the ground and was slowly moving. On the other side, Platycodon grandiflorum also walked out of the control room. Master Qin, the route has been set. The warship will follow this route until it reaches the vicinity of the secret realm. We will need to go out and look for the specific location when the time comes. Okay, Lin Yu nodded. Although Platycodon grandiflorum had entered the secret realm before, she had entered it by accident. Naturally, she did not remember the precise coordinates of the place very clearly. However, once they arrived there, Platycodon grandiflorum could observe the surrounding environment and recall the specific location of the secret realm. According to the speed of this ordinary warship, it would take a few days to reach there. After they agreed on a time, they returned to their respective rooms. When the warship was about to reach its destination, they gathered again. Lin Yu also returned to his room and sat cross-legged. He used his divine telekinesis to observe the power in his body. After breaking through to the Spirit King realm, Lin Yu's strength had increased tremendously in all aspects. For example, when Lin Yu was fighting with Platycodon grandiflorum, he had caused Platycodon grandiflorum to fall into an illusion, causing her to be unable to distinguish between reality and illusion. This was the divine telekinesis technique that Lin Yu had learned after breaking through to the Spirit King realm. Sensory manipulation. Although he had only comprehended it after breaking through to the Spirit King realm, sensory manipulation was actually closely related to the ancient mystic bird's 10,000 soul seal that Lin Yu had absorbed. It could be seen from the effect that Lin Yu's perceptual manipulation technique was similar to the illusion created by the ancient blackbird. It could even be said that the divine telekinesis technique that Lin Yu had learned was derived from the foundation of the ancient blackbird's illusion. Compared to it, not only was it more powerful, but it also had many drawbacks. For example, the ancient blackbird could only create an illusion to envelop the enemy. Furthermore, there were nodes in the illusion. If someone found the illusion, it would be easily broken, especially when facing experts who were proficient in divine telekinesis. It would be difficult to use an illusion to trap them. It was also because the lords of the fiend territory were not proficient in divine telekinesis. Otherwise, even if the ancient blackbird's realm was higher than theirs, it would not have been able to trap them in the illusion for so long and play them around. However, sensory manipulation's attack method was different. Without the enemy stepping into the illusion, it could directly control all of the enemy's perception, trapping the enemy in their own consciousness without being able to escape. And there was only one situation where the enemy could escape from the illusion. That was when their body in reality was strongly stimulated, such as an attack. However, this was not too big of a problem. Firstly, the enemy had already suffered Lin Yu's attack when they were unprepared, instantly falling into a disadvantageous position. After all, even Platycodon grandiflorum, whose realm was higher than Lin Yu's, was severely injured in that situation. Secondly, even if the enemy escaped from the illusion, Lin Yu could still repeat the same trick and use the same technique again. Of course, the above situation could only be achieved if the enemy's divine telekinesis was not as strong as Lin Yu's. If the enemy was proficient in divine telekinesis, the effect of sensory manipulation would naturally be greatly reduced. The stronger the enemy's divine telekinesis, the shorter the time that sensory manipulation could trap the enemy. Furthermore, this was only a part of Lin Yu's increase in strength. It was not only in divine telekinesis. After breaking through to the Psionic King realm, Lin Yu had also comprehended new abilities in strength and speed. At the same time, when he was breaking through to the Psionic King realm, Lin Yu also felt an inexplicable meaning flowing into his body from the heavens and earth. This meaning entered Lin Yu's mind, allowing him to gain a deeper understanding of the 8 steps of void divine ability. Although Lin Yu had not used the divine ability since then, he could vaguely feel that the power of the 8 steps of void divine ability had far surpassed what it was before. As for how much stronger the 8 steps of void divine ability had become, he would have to wait until the next time he used the divine ability to carefully observe it. After that, Lin Yu focused his mind on the abilities provided to him by the 10,000 Souls seal. After a few hours of comprehension, Lin Yu had a general understanding of the new techniques that he had obtained after breaking through. As they were abilities that he had comprehended on his own, they were different from those techniques that required practice. Just by comprehending them, Lin Yu could already be said to have a perfect grasp of them. Apart from sensory manipulation, Lin Yu had comprehended 2 other techniques from the 10,000 Soul Seal after breaking through to the Psionic King realm. They were Ripple Flash and Chi Gathering Dragon. Ripple Flash came from the 10,000 Soul Seal that he had absorbed from by Xiaoli during the sequence battle. Its effect was to allow Lin Yu's speed to break through the limit in an instant, giving the enemy an unexpected attack. Previously, during the sequence battle, Bai Xiaoli had used Lin Yu's body to fight against the 6-winged Divine King. At that time, she had avoided the 6-winged Divine King's line of sight and caused damage. Although the 6-winged Divine King's body was not present at that time, the power of this technique could still be seen. As for the other technique, Chi Gathering Dragon, it was something that Lin Yu had comprehended from Dan Long's 10,000 Soul Seal. As long as he used this technique, it would allow Lin Yu's every attack to be imbued with the tyrannical aura of a true dragon. It could directly penetrate the body and cause great damage to the divine sense. Especially when facing an enemy who relied on their divine sense, it would give him a huge advantage. By the time he had memorized the essence of these moves, it was almost nighttime. Chapter 958. Creak. Lin Yu's eyelids moved slightly as he heard the wooden door in the room being gently pushed open. Lin Yu's heart was calm. He already knew who the person who came was. Sure enough, in the next moment, a gentle voice appeared in Lin Yu's ear. Young Master Qin. Following the appearance of the voice, a gentle breath blew into Lin Yu's ear. Lin Yu opened his eyes and saw Yuja Kitami beside him in the slightly dark room. She was looking up at him with her beautiful face. "Why are you looking for me? Didn't you just show?" Yuja Kitami blushed when she heard him, but she quickly reached out her hand to cover Lin Yu's mouth. "Bai Jio and the others are staying next door. They will hear us." Lin Yu was stunned for a moment. Then he chuckled. "Come on up." Seeing Lin Yu lift the blanket, Yuja Kitami quietly climbed in. Looking into Lin Yu's deep eyes, Yuja Kitami couldn't help but lean over. The next morning, Yuja Kitami opened her eyes and saw that Lin Yu was already awake. Thinking about what happened last night, Yuja Kitami's face couldn't help but blush. Last night, she secretly came over to lie with Lin Yu, but she didn't expect that when she saw Lin Yu, she couldn't hold back and things got out of hand. But fortunately, Lin Yu used his spiritual sense to isolate the room in advance. This way, the others in the warship wouldn't find out. Just as Yuja Kitami was feeling a little relieved, a series of footsteps suddenly came from outside the room, followed by Platycodon grandiform's voice. "Master Qin, there's an accident." Upon hearing this, Yuja Kitami was stunned for a moment before she hurriedly tidied up her clothes. Lin Yu, on the other hand, frowned slightly. This was because he could sense that the warship was gradually decelerating. According to the time taken for the warship to travel, they should have just arrived near the Eastern Path Victorious region. They were far from where the Vairocana Buddha was at, so they shouldn't have stopped here. This time, Lin Yu didn't ask Yuja Kitami to hide. He waited for her to tidy up her clothes before opening the door. This. Platycodon grandiflorum's eyes widened when she saw the scene in the room. Why was Yuja Kitami in Master Qin's room so early in the morning? However, after looking around, Platycodon grandiflorum quickly realized that Yuja Kitami had probably been here since last night. There were clearly traces of two people on the bed. Platycodon grandiflorum's face couldn't help but redden at the thought of this. "Stop looking around. What's the situation outside?" Lin Yu waved his hand in front of Platycodon grandiflorum's eyes and said helplessly. Platycodon grandiflorum came back to her senses and exclaimed softly before speaking seriously. "According to the route we chose previously, we should be able to reach the Vairocana Buddha smoothly. However, there are obstacles in front of us now. If we want to pass through, we have to go through an inspection inside the warship." "Inspection?" Lin Yu frowned and asked in confusion. "Did something big happen here recently? After all, according to past experience, such a situation shouldn't have happened." The only explanation for this situation was that something special had happened. Could it be that the Dongsheng Dao territory had fallen into the hands of the six-winged Divine King? Although Platycodon grandiflorum already belonged to him, no one knew if the six-winged Divine King had any other means to find out what had happened in the demon territory. After all, the six-winged Divine King's strength was already considered top-notch in this world. Even if he had some special means, Lin Yu wouldn't be surprised. Upon hearing Lin Yu's question, Platycodon grandiflorum's expression immediately became a little awkward. "Master Qin, actually, it's because the Dongsheng Dao territory is holding an auction recently. That's why warships that want to leave the Dongsheng Dao territory will be inspected. Previously, when the warship was sailing on its own, it should have passed by a place for inspection. However, we were entering the Dongsheng Dao territory at that time, so we weren't stopped. So we're now trapped in the Dongsheng Dao territory. Unless we go through an inspection, we can't get out?" Lin Yu blinked. "Yes, it's all my fault. I should have thought of this long ago. The Dongsheng Dao territory hold an auction every 10 years, and the auction this time happens to be right now. If I had thought of this in advance, I wouldn't have chosen this path," Platycodon grandiflorum said in self-reproach. The auction in the Dongsheng Dao territory was quite famous because the items being auctioned were all rare items. Even she had heard of it. However, with Platycodon grandiflorum's identity, those rare items were nothing to her. She had never specially attended the auction, so she naturally didn't have a deep impression of it. Therefore, when she was setting the route previously, she really didn't think of this. It's fine, it's fine. Lin Yu waved his hand. It's impossible to let them inspect us. Let's think of other ways. Although Platycodon grandiflorum had already disguised herself, Yuja Kitami was still using her real appearance. Moreover, Baijio had also removed his disguise when he returned to the demon territory. Their faces would be easily recognized. Once the news spread, their whereabouts could be said to be exposed. Although Lin Yu didn't show his face, just the news of Baijio might attract the attention of the six-winged Divine King. After all, Platycodon grandiflorum had thought of using this to obtain clues related to Lin Yu. As for letting Yuja Kitami and Baijio disguise themselves, and then letting the people from the Dongsheng Dao territory enter the warship for inspection, Lin Yu thought about it and gave up. The risk was too great. Since the Dongsheng Dao territory proposed the rule of entering the warship for inspection, they must have some special means. Why don't we just barge in? Yuja Kitami couldn't help but ask after hearing the conversation between the two. This was just one of the many inspection points in the Dongsheng Dao territory. With the strength of 2 Spirit King Realm and 2 10,000 Spirit Realm experts, it wouldn't be difficult for them to barge in. No, Lin Yu shook his head. Our warship isn't fast. If they send people to chase after us, it will be difficult to shake them off. Unless we abandon the warship and travel by ourselves, that would be putting the cart before the horse. Lin Yu thought for a while and then asked Platycodon grandiflorum, "Do you know how long this auction will last?" Platycodon grandiflorum was stunned. She didn't expect Lin Yu to ask this question, but she still answered. Well, the entire auction will last about 10 days. However, the auction has been going on for some time. It will probably end in about 5 days. Lin Yu nodded and said, "Then let's go take a look at the auction. We'll leave the Dongsheng Dao territory when the auction is over." At this time, Baijio had also walked out of his room. After hearing Lin Yu's decision, everyone agreed. However, the two of you still need to disguise yourselves. Lin Yu turned his head and said to Yuja Kitami and Baijio, "Okay." The two of them nodded in unison and got busy. Platycodon grandiflorum returned to the control room and adjusted the warship's sailing route. Chapter 9:59. Half an hour later, the warship had already arrived near the Huanxing domain. Lin Yu stood by the window and looked out. A floating continent floated above the blue sky. There were pitch-black rocks floating around it, emitting a powerful aura. That's the domain formation of the Huanxing domain. Hao Tian used a special kind of stone to form it. It can increase his power in the Huanxing domain by several times. Platycodon grandiflorum followed Lin Yu's gaze and took the initiative to explain to him. Oh, Lin Yu's eyes flashed with interest. He naturally guessed that the Hao Tian that Platycodon grandiflorum mentioned was the Hao Tian Emperor. Previously, at the alchemy conference, Lin Yu had killed 2 people from the Dongsheng precept domain, which infuriated him. However, due to the protection of the 4 major clans, the Hao Tian Emperor did not attack Lin Yu. It might be interesting this time. Hearing Lin Yu's words, Platycodon grandiflorum trembled and lowered her head. She knew what Lin Yu meant. Previously, it was clearly a scheme that she had carefully planned. However, in Lin Yu's words, it was just interesting. What a terrifying man. After the previous incident, Platycodon grandiflorum also knew that Lin Yu was not only powerful, but also extremely terrifying and scheming. Lin Yu did not take Platycodon grandiflorum's reaction to heart. He only smiled and looked at the floating continent in front of him. Lin Yu did not have any feelings towards the Hao Tian Emperor. After all, he was the one who killed the other party's people. He could understand that the Hao Tian Emperor wanted to attack him. However, with Lin Yu's previous strength, it was still a little difficult to deal with the Hao Tian Emperor. However, this time, if the Supreme Sky Emperor still did not repent, Lin Yu would not mind teaching him a lesson. Just like that, Lin Yu had no intention of concealing himself. He used Qin Wunyan's appearance to enter the Dongsheng Dao domain. The warship slowly sailed into the Dongsheng Dao domain. When it approached the Dongsheng Dao domain, it had already begun to decelerate. Just as Lin Yu had expected, Many warships were sailing towards the interior of the Dongsheng Dao domain. From the looks of it, most of them were going to participate in the auction. Therefore, their warships were extremely inconspicuous among the crowd, and outsiders couldn't see anything unusual about them. Platycodon grandiflorum had previously mentioned that in the Dongsheng Dao region auction, the order of the items being auctioned was gradually rarer. Therefore, even though the auction had already started for 5 days, there was still a large number of people rushing over. Platycodon grandiflorum had already set the warship's sailing route to the location of the auction, which was the largest city in the Dongsheng Dao region, Dao City. It was also the headquarters of the Dongsheng Dao domain established by the Hao Tian Emperor. Its significance was similar to that of the Demon region's main hall. After half an hour, the warship was about to reach Dao City. Moreover, as their warship gradually approached Dao City, the number of warships around them increased. Soon, the outline of Dao City appeared in everyone's eyes. Upon seeing the appearance of the city, Yuji Kidami and Bai Jiu both widened their eyes. It was an extremely magnificent city. The entire city was enveloped in a golden Taoist rhyme, and from time to time, there would be sounds of bells ringing from within. Although Platycodon grandiflorum had never been here personally, she had seen the scene here through other means. Therefore, she wasn't that shocked. However, a trace of surprise flashed across her eyes. Seeing this Dao city with her own eyes gave her a feeling that it was far more imposing than when she had seen it before. Lin Yu, on the other hand, looked calm. Although the scene of Dao City was magnificent, he had seen even more magnificent than this. Naturally, he wouldn't lose his composure because of this. When they arrived not far from Dao City, the warship followed the instructions outside Dao City and headed to the nearby parking area. Flying was prohibited in Dao City. No matter how noble a person's status was, they had to abide by this rule. Therefore, the people who came to participate in the auction all parked their warships outside Dao City and walked in. Dao City also provided a spot for outsiders. After Platycodon grandiflorum operated it, the warship steadily stopped on the ground. Everyone walked out of the warship. As soon as they came out, they realized that there were also people who came to participate in the auction nearby. They were constantly discussing the auction as they came down from their warships. For this auction, I've exchanged all my assets for Dazzling Bot. As long as I get that jade treasure, Miss One will agree to marry me. Brother Lee, you've saved up those things for decades. This is a serious matter. Think about it carefully. Miss One is sincere to me. I made up my mind. Senior brother, I heard that this auction not only has more treasures than the previous ones, but even Hao Yin the Great is participating. Yeah, I heard about it too. I really want to meet Hao Yin the Great. If I can become his disciple, I'll be rich for the rest of my life. Hearing the conversations around him, Lin Yu felt helpless. However, Lin Yu noticed that someone mentioned Hao Yin the Great. Would Hao Yin the Great be coming to this auction as well? Things were getting interesting. Lin Yu smiled faintly. Platycodon grandiflorum shuddered when she saw this. She had heard about the grudge between Lin Yu and Hao Yin the Great. After all, the ones who died at the Grand Alchemy Conference were not small fries. They were Ling Bao and Daoist Taishang, who were the top two in the 7th sequence battle. Hao Yin the Great definitely bore a grudge against Lin Yu. At that time, he did not make a move because of the clan leaders of the 4 major clans. Now that Lin Yu was in Hao Yin the Great's territory, how could he hold back? However, Platycodon grandiflorum was not too worried about Lin Yu. Instead, she pitted Hao Yin the Great. He definitely did not know how strong Lin Yu had become. Although Hao Yin the Great's ranking on the divine leaderboard was much higher than hers, Lin Yu was not simple either. Lin Yu walked calmly into Dao City. Yuji Kitami and Bai Jiu, who had disguised themselves, followed behind him. They observed their surroundings. Everything here was new to them. Soon, they arrived at the entrance of Dao City. It was a huge city gate. There was a golden plaque hanging above the city gate. The word Dao was engraved on it. People flowed around, and there were guards maintaining order near the city gate. However, Lin Yu noticed that there was a group of burly young men surrounding a few people inside the city gate. The people who were surrounded looked terrified. In the end, they took out their storage bags and handed them over with gloomy faces. Then they left dejectedly. The guards who were maintaining order nearby acted as if they couldn't see what was happening there and ignored it. Lin Yu smiled. It seemed that the situation in Dao City was not as glamorous as it looked on the outside. Chapter 960. Lin Yu's group continued to walk into the city. Coincidentally, the youths were looking for the next batch of prey. They immediately stared at Lin Yu's group. Although Platycodon grandiflorum and Yuja Kitami had disguised themselves and even restrained their auras, their temperament could not be hidden. They immediately attracted their attention. The youths looked at each other and walked toward Lin Yu's group with strange laughter. Because Platycodon grandiflorum had taken the initiative to hide her strength, the strength she revealed now was only around the 10,000 soul realm. Therefore, in the eyes of the youths, Lin Yu's group was just a group of 10,000 soul realm fellows. One of them did not even have a trace of cultivation. Although the 10,000 soul realm was considered an expert, it was not that troublesome for them. What are you planning to do in Dao City? The leading youth put on a kind smile and took the initiative to ask them. The youths behind him silently surrounded Lin Yu's group with inexplicable smiles. Some of the people around saw this scene and quickly left. Some of them could not help but feel pity for Lin Yu's group, especially when they had two such beautiful women. It would not end well for them if they were targeted by those people. However, no one dared to remind Lin Yu's group. Even the nearby guards acted as if they did not see anything. Lin Yu raised his eyebrows. Of course, we're here to participate in the auction. The leading youth was stunned. He did not expect that the person who answered him would be a person who did not seem to have any cultivation. Did our boss ask you? Shut up. The youth on the side immediately said fiercely, but the leading youth immediately reached out to stop him. Hee. My name is Yang Luo. I'm from Dao City and am very familiar with this place. Why don't I take you around? The leader named Yang Luo had a smile on his face, but his eyes would occasionally sweep over Yuja Kitami and Platycodon grandiflorum. Every time he did so, a hint of greed would appear in his eyes. Beima Yu and the others had also seen the scene of these people doing evil, but they didn't say anything and left the decision to Lin Yu. As for Platycodon grandiflorum, she was curious. With her eyesight, she naturally understood what was going on. She mainly wanted to see how Lin Yu would deal with it. Sure, Lin Yu smiled. This time, Yang Luo was even more at a loss. Were these people really stupid? He had never thought that he would be able to trick Lin Yu and the others. He had planned to use force, but Lin Yu had actually agreed. Yang Luo couldn't figure it out, so he stopped thinking about it and said to Lin Yu and the others, "Then you guys come with me." To Yang Luo, Dao City could be considered half of his territory. Here, as long as he didn't provoke Hao Tian the Great, nothing else mattered. As he walked, Yang Luo turned back to look at Lin Yu and the others. When he found that they had really followed him, he couldn't help but feel delighted. Today's luck was pretty good. Just by coming out for a walk, he could meet such a beautiful girl. The other young men followed behind Lin Yu and the others, blocking their escape route as if to prevent them from escaping. Soon, Lin Yu and the others walked towards a nearby path under Yang Luo's lead. There were obviously fewer people there than near the city gate. When the people near the city gate saw Yang Luo and the others leave, they dared to whisper among themselves. Why did that guy come out to harm people again? I'm afraid those people are doomed. Who asked them to have such a good father? Otherwise, with their behavior, they would have died 100 times over. Chill. Don't let them hear you, or you'll be dead. On the other side, Yang Luo led Lin Yu and the others to a more remote place. In addition, the people nearby hurriedly left when they saw Yang Luo. Other than Lin Yu and the others, only Yang Luo and the other young men were left. We're here. Yang Luo turned around and said with a smile. What's there to turn around for? Lin Yu asked calmly. When Yang Luo saw Lin Yu's expression, he felt a little uneasy. How could Lin Yu still be so calm at a time like this? How could Lin Yu and the others not see through their obvious actions? However, the evil thoughts in Yang Luo's mind quickly swallowed up his remaining reason. He turned his head to look at Platycodon grandiflorum and the others, his eyes filled with lust. All right, since we're already here, I won't pretend with you. Tie up these two men and leave the woman to me. Young Luo revealed an evil smile and ordered the others. Understood. The young men rushed towards Lin Yu and the others and pressed them to the ground. Yang Luo, on the other hand, stared straight ahead and walked towards Yuji Kitami and Platycodon grandiflorum with a mischievous smile on his face. At the same time, Lin Yu and the others were standing there unscathed. In their line of sight, Yang Luo and the other young men were standing there in a daze. Yang Luo even let out a few strange laughs from time to time. There, Yuji Kitami asked with a puzzled expression. Just now, these people looked like they wanted to rush up, but for some reason, they suddenly froze in place. It's an illusion, Lin Yu said softly. Yuji Kitami nodded as if she understood, but her eyes were filled with shock. This move was too powerful. Lin Yu didn't hesitate. He stretched out his hand and waved his glory chi, killing everyone except Yang Luo in one strike. These people knew that Yuji Kitami and the others had the strength of the 10,000 soul realm, yet they still dared to come forward. Naturally, their realms weren't low. Every one of them had the cultivation of the 10,000 soul realm. But under Lin Yu's casual attack, they didn't have the slightest chance to resist and died directly. This was the power of perceptual manipulation. It made the other party completely lose their resistance. At this moment, Yang Luo, who wasn't attacked, suddenly woke up. This was Lin Yu taking the initiative to remove the control on him. Yang Luo was stunned when he woke up. He was clearly about to touch the two women. Why did he change positions? Just as Yang Luo was about to curse, he suddenly noticed the people lying on the ground around him and Lin Yu, who was looking at him with a smile. Yang Luo's pupils constricted as he hurriedly took a few steps back. Who are you people? Even if he was a fool, he could understand this scene. The person in front of him wasn't a mortal at all. He was clearly a terrifyingly strong expert. He was actually able to kill all of his men without him noticing. If that was the case, wouldn't killing him be as easy as flipping his hand? After all, Yang Luo's cultivation had just broken through to the 10,000 soul realm, and his dead subordinates were even at the peak of the 10,000 soul realm. He originally planned to treat Lin Yu and the others as prey, but he never expected such a scene to happen. Chapter 9:61. Seeing that Lin Yu was only smiling and had no intention of speaking, Yang Luo's forehead was dripping with cold sweat. Everything that happened before was a misunderstanding. Now that my men are dead and nothing has happened to you, why don't we just forget about it? Yang Luo said in a trembling voice. Although Lin Yu did not deliberately use his killing intent to intimidate him, he was still scared out of his wits. Forget about it? Lin Yu asked with a faint smile. Yang Luo's head was like a chick pecking at rice, nodding frantically. Yes, yes, yes. As long as you let me go, I promise I won't pursue the matter. However, when Yang Luo lowered his head, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Today, he had been scared to this extent. When he returned, he must have a good talk with his father and ask him to capture these people. No matter how strong they were definitely no match for his father. Is that all you know how to say? Lin Yu shook his head and walked slowly towards him. Lin Yu did not know Yang Luo's identity, but he had already guessed that Yang Luo must be a descendant of one of the higher-ups in Dao City. Otherwise, he would not be so arrogant in Dao City. When Lin Yu got off the warship and heard from others that Hao Tian Emperor would be participating in this auction, he had already come up with a plan. Otherwise, he would not have wasted his time and come here with Yang Luo. Seeing Lin Yu's actions, Yang Luo trembled in fear, but his feet could not move due to fear. He could only watch as Lin Yu approached him step by step. Don't kill me. My father is the city lord of Dao City. If you dare touch me, my father will definitely not forgive you. Yang Luo originally did not intend to reveal his father's identity. Although he had already made up his mind to take revenge on Lin Yu, he was still in the hands of others. Naturally, he was afraid that Lin Yu would guess his intentions. However, Lin Yu's actions directly destroyed his plan. Yang Luo had no choice but to reveal his father's identity in order to frighten Lin Yu. Otherwise, he could see that Lin Yu was planning to walk up to him and kill him. As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Yu stopped. The city lord of Dao City. Lin Yu sighed. He had actually caught a big fish. When Yang Luo saw Lin Yu stop, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. He thought that Lin Yu was stunned by his words, so he quickly continued. That's right. My father is the city lord. As long as you let me go, I can give you a lot of benefits. Lin Yu turned to Platycodon grandiflorum and asked, Do you know the city lord of this Dao city? Platycodon grandiflorum nodded. I met him a few times. He's an early-stage Spirit King Realm guy with average strength. Are there many Spirit King Realm experts in the Dongsheng Dao domain? Lin Yu asked. Aside from the Clear Sky Emperor, it should be the city lord. Yang Luo was dumbfounded when he saw this. This person was not afraid after knowing his father's identity. Instead, he was pleasantly surprised. What was going on? Hey, what are you guys planning to do? Yang Luo quickly asked. But Lin Yu turned around and ignored him. He just said indifferently, Call your father over. Although Yang Luo did not know what Lin Yu was planning, he could still sense a dangerous aura from it. Therefore, he immediately rejected it. I don't know what you plan to do, but don't you dare plot against my father. Although Yang Luo was a hedonistic son who did evil everywhere in Dao City and had a bad reputation, he sincerely respected his father. Lin Yu calmly walked to Yang Luo's side and pulled out a small knife under Yang Luo's horrified gaze. Although Yang Luo's body was not bound by a physical body, his divine thought was already under Lin Yu's control. Naturally, he could not move at all. Immediately after, Yang Luo saw Lin Yu slash at him with a knife. Then, he felt a sharp pain. Pa! A finger fell to the ground. Ah! Yang Luo screamed. However, he did not know what method Lin Yu had used to seal the area. No one came to investigate after hearing his screams. Lin Yu ignored Yang Luo's screams. He did not even ask him to call his father over. He continued to slash expressionlessly. 1 slash, 2 slashes. After 10 slashes, one of Yang Luo's hands could no longer be seen. Yang Luo's face was covered in snot and tears. His screams became extremely hoarse. You devil! Yang Luo looked at Lin Yu in horror. His eyes were filled with horror. In his eyes, Lin Yu's methods were completely beyond his imagination. Lin Yu treated him as if he was slaughtering a demon beast. There was no trace of mercy. Lin Yu ignored him and calmly turned to his other hand. At that moment, Yang Luo finally could not take it anymore. I beg you, please stop. I'll call my father over. Upon hearing his words, Lin Yu put down the knife in his hand. Lin Yu did not tell him what to say. Therefore, after contacting his father, Yang Luo only forced himself to calm down and ask him to come over. However, after sending a message, Yang Luo suddenly realized that the pain he had felt earlier had disappeared. He hurriedly looked down and saw that his arm was unharmed. Seeing this, Yang Luo finally understood. His eyes had been deceived again, just like before. Yang Luo's mouth revealed a wry smile. He was really being played in the palm of someone's hand. There was no room for resistance. On the other side, Platycodon grandiflorum and the others stared at Lin Yu with wide eyes. The scene just now was naturally Lin Yu's perception manipulation. Although the people outside could not see what happened in the illusion, Yang Luo's painful screams naturally indicated what was happening inside. Too terrifying. Platycodon grandiflorum thought again in her heart. However, she did not dislike Lin Yu's approach at all. After all, Platycodon grandiflorum was also a ruthless person. She had personally tortured Bai Jiu before. Therefore, after seeing Lin Yu's actions, Platycodon grandiflorum not only did not dislike him, but also felt that she had met someone similar. Get ready. The city lord will be here in a while. Lin Yu turned around and ordered everyone. After the fight starts, Platycodon grandiflorum and I will be responsible for dealing with him. If he brings anyone else, I will leave it to the two of you. Understood. Hearing this, Yuji Kitami and Bai Jiu both nodded. Then, everyone began to clean up the scene. According to Lin Yu's instructions, they dragged the corpses on the ground to the side and piled them up. They also tied Yang Luo up and threw him over. In this way, after an incense stick of time, the place was cleaned up and no traces could be seen. Lin Yu and the others stayed next to a wooden house, waiting for the city lord to appear. Chapter 962. Lin Yu and company did not wait long before a powerful aura suddenly appeared and locked onto them. Sensing the appearance of this aura, Yang Luo was delighted at first, but he soon became worried. Although his father was an expert at the Spirit King realm and was above everyone else in the Dongsheng Dao domain, Lin Yu and company had clearly come prepared. They had deliberately lured his father here and probably set up some kind of trap. Luo, with a loud shout, a figure appeared and arrived with a loud bang. Many cracks even spread out from under the figure's feet on the ground. When the dust settled, that person appeared in front of Lin Yu and company. It was a middle-aged man with white hair and a Taoist robe. Father! Yang Luo fell to the ground and covered his face as he hurriedly shouted at the middle-aged man. Although Yang Luo was tied up and thrown to the ground, the middle-aged man still saw him at a glance. Luo, I'm Dao City's city lord, Yang Qingsong. Why did you attack my son? If he has offended you in any way, I'm willing to offer an apology. When Yang Qingsong saw his son's appearance, although he was a little angry, he still calmed down and spoke calmly to Lin Yu and company. When he received Yang Luo's message, he had already sensed that something was wrong. His son usually did not speak in such a tone, so he hurriedly rushed over. Yang Qingsong wasn't in Dao City at the time. The time it took for an incense stick to burn was already his fastest speed. Yang Qingsong knew very well what Yang Luo was like in the past. This time, his son had probably provoked someone, and it was a very strong person. Otherwise, he would not have been able to deal with the guards he had sent to protect Yang Luo. However, Yang Qingsong was not too worried. After all, this was Dao City, his home ground. Even if the other party could deal with someone at the Myriad Spirit Realm, it did not mean that they were a threat to him. After all, the difference between the Myriad Spirit Realm and the Spirit King Realm was like heaven and earth. At the very least, he could ask the Supreme Heaven Emperor to step in for him. Based on your son's personality, do you think we would provoke him first? Lin Yu calmly replied to Yang Qingsong's question. Seeing Lin Yu answer him, Yang Qingsong was a little surprised. He didn't expect the leader of these people to be Lin Yu. He clearly didn't have any cultivation. However, Yang Qingsong's expression immediately became awkward. It seemed that this time, it was his son who had caused trouble. Furthermore, he had encountered a tough opponent. I'm really sorry. You know who I am. As long as you're willing to let my son go, I can compensate you with many things. Furthermore, I swear that I won't make things difficult for you in the future. Yang Qingsong said to Lin Yu with an apologetic look on his face. During this period of time, Yang Qingsong had already sensed the cultivation of Lin Yu and the others. He discovered that other than Lin Yu, the other three were all at the Myriad Soul Realm. Although Yang Qingsong could use his Spirit King Realm strength to quickly kill a few 10,000 Soul Realm experts for Yang Luo's safety, he still wanted to use negotiation to exchange for Yang Luo. As for what he said about not pursuing the matter, it was completely to confuse Lin Yu and the others. Yang Qingsong had already made plans. As long as Yang Luo was safe, he would immediately take action. After hearing Yang Qingsong's words, Lin Yu smiled faintly. All right. Following which, Bai Jiu untied the ropes on Yang Luo and pushed him out. Yang Qingsong was taken aback as his expression became uncertain. His original plan was to first deal with Lin Yu and the others and use money to exchange for Yang Luo before attacking Lin Yu and the others. However, Lin Yu actually released his son without hesitation. This made Yang Qingsong, who originally wanted to immediately take action, hesitate. There must be something fishy about this. Yang Qingsong thought to himself as he stared at Lin Yu and the others. However, Lin Yu still had a faint smile on his face as he looked at him without panic. Father, after Yang Luo was untied, he ran behind Yang Qingsong like a wisp of smoke. Ever since he saw the miserable state of his subordinates, he didn't want to stay near Lin Yu for a moment longer. My son is insensible. Thank you for your mercy. This one will take him home and teach him a good lesson. Yang Qingsong saw that Lin Yu and the others didn't move, so he cupped his fists and said. Then, he planned to turn around and leave with Yang Luo. Lin Yu wasn't surprised when he saw this. He knew that with Yang Qingsong's status, he naturally didn't really intend to compensate them from the beginning. Instead, it was very likely that he planned to silence them. However, Lin Yu's actions made Yang Qingsong a little more wary, so he didn't make a move. What about the compensation we agreed on before? Lin Yu asked faintly. Could it be that City Lord Yang is actually a person who doesn't keep his promises? Hearing Lin Yu's harsh words, Yang Qingsong frowned. Although he didn't understand Lin Yu's actions and felt wary because of it, it didn't mean that he was willing to be humiliated. As the City Lord of Dao City, Yang Qingsong was usually treated with respect by everyone. The Supreme Heaven Emperor rarely appeared in front of outsiders, so he could be considered a unique existence in the Dongxing Dao territory. Kid, don't be ungrateful. You should understand the difference in strength between you and me. Yang Qingsong looked at Lin Yu and said coldly. He suddenly became unyielding because Yang Luo had returned to his side. Most importantly, he had already sensed Yang Luo's body and found nothing strange. This meant that the other party didn't do anything to Yang Luo. Naturally, he didn't need to be polite to Lin Yu and the others. Then what if I insist on you compensating? In the face of the imposing aura, Lin Yu's expression didn't change. He still looked calm. Hearing this, Yang Qingsong finally couldn't hold it in anymore. His face was filled with anger as he grabbed Lin Yu and the others with one hand. Arrogant. Soon, you will pay the price for what you said. Yang Qingsong shouted angrily. Then, a giant golden hand appeared out of thin air, causing ripples in the nearby space. As Yang Qingsong clenched his fist, the giant golden hand grabbed at Lin Yu and the others, bringing with it a strong wind. Whoosh! Looking at the golden hand that occupied most of the sky, a smile appeared on Yang Luo's face. This move was his father's best move. It was extremely lethal. Even an existence at the peak of the 10,000 soul realm would be annihilated under this attack. It's just a pity for those two beautiful women, Yang Luo thought in his heart. Chapter 963. The giant golden palm smashed down, seemingly intending to kill Lin Yu and the others. Lin Yu and the others' vision was covered by the golden color, but they didn't panic at all. Knowing Lin Yu, they knew that this move was nothing to Lin Yu. Sure enough, facing the powerful aura, Lin Yu raised his hand with a smile. Boom! Boom! The huge golden palm collided with Lin Yu's fist, creating a sharp contrast between the size of the fist and the size of the fist. A huge explosion sounded, and the entire Dao city seemed to shake. As the smoke dissipated, Yang Qingsong and Yang Luo looked forward, their eyes widened in disbelief. In front of them, Lin Yu slowly lowered his arm, and no injuries could be seen on his body. How is this possible? Yang Qingsong shook his head, not daring to imagine his eyes. Although he didn't use 100% of his strength in that move, because they were inside Dao City, it wasn't a problem for him to kill a few guys in the 10,000 spirits realm. However, the scene in front of him clearly told him that his move did not cause the slightest bit of damage to Lin Yu and the others. Yang Luo was dumbfounded when he saw this, and his mind went blank. Suddenly, Yang Qingsong's pupil shrank, and he stared at Lin Yu. After a few breaths, Yang Qingsong's face became uglier and uglier. In his eyes, Lin Yu was still a person without any cultivation base, but such a person was actually able to block his move without any injuries. It was truly frightening. Thinking of this, Yang Qingsong's hair stood on end, and he hurriedly wanted to take Yang Luo away. He already understood that since Lin Yu knew his strength and identity and deliberately led him here, he must be confident. Coupled with the strange scene that had just happened, Yang Qingsong wished he could leave this place immediately. But ideals and reality often ran counter to each other. Just as Yang Qing was about to pull Yang Luo away, Yang Luo suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his eyes were filled with confusion. "Father, what's wrong with me?" Yang Luo's face turned pale. At the same time, blood flowed uncontrollably from the corner of his mouth. Yang Qing reached out and placed his hand on Yang Luo's shoulder. He used his divine sense to check Yang Luo's body, but he found nothing. Terrifying. At this moment, not only Yang Luo, but even Yang Qing heart was filled with fear. He couldn't understand what was going on with the changes that followed, and a fear of the unknown eroded the two of them. "City Lord Yang, can you consider the matter of compensation this time?" Lin Yu asked with a smile as everyone walked over. Seeing Lin Yu's figure, Yang Luo hurriedly shrank back, his eyes filled with fear. When Yang Qing heard Lin Yu's voice, he felt his scalp go numb. At this moment, he couldn't help but regret it. If only he had honestly given the compensation before. "What do you want? I'll get someone to send it over." Yang Qing looked as if he had admitted defeat. Seeing these strange methods, he no longer had any thoughts of continuing to resist. "As long as you help my son recover, I'll give you anything you want." Looking at Yang Luo, who was still vomiting blood in his arms and looking dispirited, Yang Qing said with some heartache, "Oh." Lin Yu smiled gently. "Then how about using your life to exchange for your son's?" Hearing this, Yang Qing expression changed drastically. "What do you mean?" Lin Yu raised his eyebrows and looked at him calmly. Noticing Lin Yu's gaze, Yang Qing was instantly filled with anger. As a Spirit King realm expert, Lin Yu dared to say that he wanted his life. Lin Yu looked down on him. "Although I don't know what method you used, I don't believe that no one in the entire Dongsheng Dao domain can solve it," Yang Qing said angrily. Then, he picked up Yang Luo and planned to leave. Although Lin Yu had blocked the move he had used previously, Yang Qing only felt that Lin Yu had used some strange method to resolve it. He had yet to guess Lin Yu's true strength. With his current mood, if not for the strange illness that had appeared in Yang Luo's body, he would definitely compete with Lin Yu. But just as Yang Qing turned around, Yang Luo let out a scream. Yang Qing hurriedly looked over and found that Yang Luo's aura was rapidly weakening. The strangest thing was that there was a scarlet line of air extending from Yang Luo's heart. Looking at the scarlet line of air, Yang Qing was shocked to find that the other side of the line was actually Lin Yu. This scarlet line of air was clearly shot out from Lin Yu's hand. It was the blood sacrifice heart refinement. "You, what did you do?" Yang Qing asked with an uncertain expression. He had already guessed that Lin Yu was probably using this method to control Yang Luo. Moreover, this method was extremely strange. There wasn't even any contact. Just by relying on an untouchable red line, he was able to control his son's life. "City Lord Yang is so smart. You should be able to guess it." Lin Yu smiled faintly. He already knew Yang Qing thoughts like the back of his hand. After experiencing 100,000 years of reincarnation, his insight had been raised to the extreme. Not to mention Yang Qing thoughts, Lin Yu could even infer what he was planning to do next. It was precisely because of this ability that Lin Yu was able to play around with others time and time again. It wasn't because those people weren't smart enough. Those who needed Lin Yu's schemes to deal with were all powerhouses. They hadn't lived so many years in vain. Unfortunately, they met Lin Yu. Their thoughts were completely seen through by Lin Yu. Naturally, they were led by the nose, just like Yang Qing was now. Facing Lin Yu's question, Yang Qing eyes dimmed. Yang Qing was silent for a while. He knew that Lin Yu was forcing him to make a decision. Should he give up his life for Yang Luo? He knew that when Lin Yu said he wanted his life, he naturally didn't mean to kill him. He should be using other means to control his life. However, Yang Qing heart was still filled with indignation. Despicable. If you didn't use my son to threaten me, I wouldn't. Yang Qing face was full of struggle. It was really difficult for him to accept submitting to a young man like Lin Yu. However, he knew that once he refused, Yang Luo would face death. Hearing Yang Qing-song's words, Lin Yu let out a chuckle. Chapter 964. Since you're not convinced, I'll give you a chance. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Qing-song suddenly realized that his surroundings had changed. He had arrived in a very unfamiliar environment. Yang Qing-song looked around and could not recognize where he was. Not only had the environment changed, but even Lin Yu and his son had disappeared. Yang Qing-song was very experienced. After a moment of panic, he quickly came back to his senses and guessed the situation. Is this an illusion? After observing for a week, Yang Qing-song frowned and slowly guessed. As a Spirit King realm expert, he naturally would not be teleported to a faraway place without noticing. The only thing that could cause this effect was that he had fallen into an illusion. That was the only explanation that made sense. After figuring this out, Yang Qing-song's heart calmed down a little. Since he knew that it was an illusion, he could make corresponding countermeasures. Yang Qing-song's attainments in divine telekinesis were not deep. Although he could not break it, he would not panic and use random moves to waste his Yao energy. He just had to wait for the Yao energy that Lin Yu used to maintain the illusion to dissipate. However, just as Yang Qing-song heaved a sigh of relief, he suddenly felt a pain on his neck. Then, the scene in front of him changed, and Yang Qing-song realized that he had left the illusion. However, what frightened him was that drops of blood were slowly seeping out of his neck. Yang Qing-song wiped off the blood on his neck. The wound was very small, and with his cultivation, it healed very quickly. However, he was not afraid of his injury. He was afraid that Lin Yu was able to touch his vitals without him noticing. What if the attack just now was not a probing attack, and he had used his full strength? Yang Qing-song knew that he had lost the competition just now. Under Lin Yu's means, he had no room to fight back. Yang Luo stared blankly at this scene. In his eyes, his father suddenly froze on the spot. Then, Lin Yu walked over and took out a dagger to gently cut his father's neck. His father did not resist at all. Yang Luo suddenly understood that this was probably what happened to him when he was hit. At this point, Yang Qing-song finally understood that he was no match for Lin Yu. Even if Lin Yu did not use Yang Luo to threaten him, the final result would be the same. I'm willing to accept my loss. I'm willing to listen to your orders. Facing Lin Yu, Yang Qing-song lowered his head deeply. Very good. Lin Yu smiled faintly and retracted his hand. The scarlet thread of energy that was connected to Yang Luo from Lin Yu's hand also disappeared. Yang Luo's expression froze. The symptoms of vomiting blood disappeared, and his complexion gradually recovered. Seeing this, Yang Qing-song finally heaved a sigh of relief. Eat this. Lin Yu took out a pill and tossed it to Yang Qing-song. Yang Qing-song took the pill and looked at it with some hesitation, but he couldn't see any clues from the surface of the pill. This was a pill that he had never seen before. Lin Yu only looked at him indifferently and did not speak. But Yang Qing-song suddenly reacted. He was already a prisoner, so he had no right to ask questions. Yang Qing-song clenched his teeth and swallowed the pill. He did not play any tricks while swallowing the pill. After all the things that happened before, he already knew that no matter what he did, he could not hide from Lin Yu's eyes. Seeing Yang Qing-song swallow the pill, Lin Yu nodded in satisfaction. Then Lin Yu raised his hand, and a scarlet thread of energy that was exactly the same as before appeared between Yang Qing-song's heart and his hand. Blood sacrifice heart refinement. Successful. Lin Yu smiled. Previously, when Yang Luo was trapped in the illusion, he fed him the pill, which proved that the 10,000 spirits realm could also be affected by blood sacrifice heart refinement. And this was the first time he used blood sacrifice heart refinement to control a Spirit King realm expert. Sure enough, even a Spirit King realm expert could not escape the shackles of blood sacrifice heart refinement. The moment the red thread appeared, Yang Qing-song suddenly felt a throbbing in his heart. His life and death were in Lin Yu's hands. Sir, under such a threat, Yang Qing-song decisively lowered his head and asked, "What do you need me to do? As the city lord of Dao City, I still have some authority." As he spoke, A proud smile appeared on Yang Qingsong's face. In fact, he was already being humble. With his strength and status, he was already considered a top-notch existence in the Dongsheng Dao domain, unless it involved the Clear Sky Emperor. Then can you let the Clear Sky Emperor eat this pill in my hand? Lin Yu took out another pill and asked with a smile. Hearing this, Yang Qingsong's smile froze. He could see that the pill in Lin Yu's hand was the same as the one he had eaten before. His target was actually the Clear Sky Emperor. But how could he send this pill into the Clear Sky Emperor's mouth? Although the two of them were close, it was not to that extent. Yang Qingsong hurriedly shook his head, and, at the same time, he felt bitter. From Lin Yu's behavior, he could see that this person was definitely not someone to be trifled with. His future days would not be easy. After seeing Yang Qingsong's rejection, Lin Yu did not immediately give up his previous idea. Because his plan had just begun. When he met Yang Luo previously, he had a sudden idea. He wanted to use the people in Dao City to control the Clear Sky Emperor. Now that their whereabouts were hidden, Lin Yu naturally did not want to make a move if he could not attract attention. Let's go back first. I'll teach you what to do when the time comes, Lin Yu instructed. Seeing that Lin Yu had not given up his previous idea, Yang Qingsong smiled bitterly in his heart, but he did not dare to stop him. After all, his life was now completely in Lin Yu's hands. Okay, Yang Qingsong responded, then led Lin Yu and the others away. Lin Yu removed the effect of Yang Luo's blood loss. With his recovery speed in the 10,000 spirits realm, his body could barely keep up with the others. Chapter 965. It didn't take long for them to arrive in front of a huge castle. There were a large number of guards patrolling around the castle. When they saw Yang Qingsong and Yang Luo, they hurriedly greeted them respectfully. However, there was some surprise in their eyes. This was because Yang Qingsong and Yang Luo were not in good condition. One of them looked pale, while the other was covered in blood. However, without Yang Qingsong's instructions, they did not dare to ask. Yang Qingsong led Lin Yu and the others into the castle. With him around, the guards did not check Lin Yu and the others. After that, they came to the meeting hall. Sir, please sit here. Yang Qingsong gave the seat at the front to Lin Yu. Then, he looked like he was all ears. According to the trivial news he had heard before, Lin Yu began to ask him about it. Although he now controlled Yang Qingsong and basically controlled more than half of the Dongsheng Dao territory, he naturally did not need to be checked if he wanted to leave the Dongsheng Dao territory now. However, since he was already here, Lin Yu still planned to get rid of the hidden danger, the Haotian Emperor. After all, Lin Yu had killed those two guys in front of the Haotian Emperor. With the Haotian Emperor's status, how could he take this lying down? The Haotian Emperor's revenge had not come yet, because he had not found the best opportunity to do so. Let's talk about this auction first, Lin Yu said faintly. Yang Qingsong nodded and began to introduce the auction to them. Unlike the Platycodon grandiflorum's introduction previously, Yang Qingsong's explanation was more detailed this time. Moreover, as the city lord of Dao City, Yang Qingsong naturally knew the situation of this auction very well. It turned out that although the auction that was held once every 10 years was an auction in name, its main purpose was to collect treasures for the Haotian Emperor. Before the auction started, there would be many people who would bring their treasures to the auction house. If there were any treasures that the Haotian Emperor was interested in, he would instruct his subordinates to bid for them during the auction. With the Haotian Emperor's wealth, he would definitely be able to get what he wanted. That was why the auction continued like this. Everyone was rather surprised when they heard this. They hadn't expected there to be such a hidden story behind it. Even Yang Luo was rather surprised because even he didn't know about it. I heard that Haotian Emperor will personally attend the auction this time. Platycodon grandiflorum asked curiously. Yes, Yang Qingsong nodded and agreed with this statement. The Supreme Sky Emperor has already read through the list of items that appeared in the auction. This time, there doesn't seem to be any items that he likes. The reason why the Supreme Sky Emperor is participating in the auction is because he personally planned it. He wants to increase the scale of this auction and attract more treasures. Everyone understood what he meant. Clearly, to the Supreme Sky Emperor, the auction was like countless people presenting treasures to him to choose from. As for the news that occasionally appeared, it was just a means by which the Supreme Sky Emperor wanted to improve the quality of the auction. Lin Yu pondered for a moment and came up with a plan. Lin Yu didn't care that they were still in the meeting hall. He directly took out a batch of herbs and raised his right hand. The 11-colored flame suddenly appeared. A powerful aura filled the meeting hall. However, Lin Yu had already expected this. Before activating the flame, he used his divine thought to isolate the meeting hall. In this way, the aura of the 11-colored flame only existed in the meeting hall and did not leak out. However, Yang Qingsong and Yang Luo felt that the aura was even more powerful because of this. Their expressions changed. What a terrifying flame! As a Spirit King realm expert, Yang Qingsong had seen many alchemists in the past. He had even met rare 9th-grade alchemists a few times. However, he had never seen such a terrifying flame. Lin Yu threw the herbs into the 11-colored flame one by one. The moment they entered the flame, they melted into drops of crystal-clear medicinal liquid. Yang Qingsong and Yang Luo widened their eyes in disbelief when they saw that Lin Yu didn't even have an alchemy furnace and was about to start refining pills. However, they didn't dare to ask questions. They could only stare at Lin Yu's actions. A large number of herbs were melted into medicinal liquid and gathered together. 10%, 30%, 90%. A rich pill fragrance wafted out and filled the entire meeting hall. Yang Qingsong and Yang Luo's expressions brightened when they smelled the aroma. Although the two of them didn't know what kind of pill Lin Yu was refining, they could feel that the quality of this pill was very high just from the aura it gave off. Soon, the pill took shape and Lin Yu took it out. Here, send this pill to the auction. Lin Yu put the pill into a porcelain bottle and handed it to Yang Qingsong. After hesitating for a moment, Yang Qingsong took the bottle and asked, "Yes. Sir, may I ask what kind of pill this is?" Vitreous Vitality Pill. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Qingsong's eyes widened. The Vitreous Vitality Pill could greatly increase the strength of the user's divine will. It was extremely precious for people like them who didn't know how to cultivate their divine will. However, what was the purpose of Lin Yu refining this pill? Even if the Clear Sky Emperor found it and bought it after the auction started, it wouldn't be of any help to Lin Yu. However, when Yang Qingsong saw Lin Yu's faint smile, he suddenly shuddered and swallowed the words he was about to ask. He knew that Lin Yu had his reasons for doing this. However, it wasn't appropriate for him to ask about it now. He just had to carry it out. After receiving the bottle, Yang Qingsong cupped his fists and walked out. Yang Luo also left the meeting hall after Lin Yu waved his hand. After they left, only Lin Yu and the other three were left in the room. Lin Yu used his divine will to isolate the meeting hall. "Young Master Qin, do you plan to teach the Clear Sky Emperor a lesson?" Yuji Kitami asked. During the alchemy conference, she was in the same group as Lin Yu. Naturally, she knew what had happened. She also knew that the Clear Sky Emperor had planned to attack Lin Yu. However, he didn't do it because the four clan leaders had intervened. Lin Yu shook his head. That's not all. Hearing Lin Yu's words, Yuji Kitami and the others were shocked. It seemed that Lin Yu's plan was far beyond what they could guess. However, since Lin Yu didn't take the initiative to say it, they didn't continue asking. However, at this moment, Platycodon grandiflorum frowned slightly and said worriedly, "Master Qin, the Clear Sky Emperor's ability is far above mine. He's ranked very high on the God leaderboard. His ability must have reached the peak of the spiritual king realm. He might have already touched the level above." Platycodon grandiflorum didn't have much contact with the Clear Sky Emperor. She had only seen him during the God leaderboard. At that time, the Clear Sky Emperor could suppress a group of spiritual king realm experts. Few people in the spiritual king realm could exchange more than 10 blows with him. No one was his match. Hearing Platycodon grandiflorum's words, Lin Yu's eyes narrowed. Could he be at the Emperor realm? However, Lin Yu wasn't afraid at all. With his thorough consideration of things, this situation had already appeared in his expectations. With Platycodon grandiflorum's reminder, the probability of this happening was higher. I got it. Seeing that Lin Yu only nodded calmly, Platycodon grandiflorum felt a little uneasy. However, she forced herself to calm down. Although they hadn't known each other for long, she knew that Lin Yu wasn't a reckless person. Since he had said so, he was naturally confident. After Lin Yu withdrew his divine telekinesis, the few of them left the meeting hall. They were led to the guest rooms by the servants that Yang Qingsong had arranged. Chapter 966. Sirs, the rooms that the Castellan has arranged for you are right in front. The maid in charge of leading the way said respectfully to Lin Yu and the others. Although she had never seen Lin Yu and the others before, Yang Qingsong had solemnly instructed her to treat Lin Yu and the others with utmost respect. From Yang Qingsong's tone, she could tell that he was serious when he said that. This made the maid curious about Lin Yu and the others' identities. Who were they that Yang Qingsong valued them so much? Yes. Lin Yu nodded. The auction was only halfway through, and there were still a few days before it ended. He had just entrusted Yang Qingsong to send the vitreous vitality pill to the auction. Although Yang Qingsong, as the city lord, could add the vitreous vitality pill to the list of items to be auctioned in the middle of the auction, it would still have to be put on display for at least 2 days. During this time, Lin Yu and the others would temporarily stay in the Castellan's mansion. The maid had already brought Lin Yu and the others to their destination. After saying goodbye respectfully, she bowed and left. Although she was curious about Lin Yu and the others' identities, she knew that it was not something she could touch. Naturally, she would not ask. Yang Qingsong had prepared a total of 4 rooms for them, which were just enough for the 4 of them. After everyone returned to their rooms to tidy up, Lin Yu began to think about his future plans. The current situation was the first step in his plan, and it was also the most important step. It would affect the success of the entire plan. However, the following situation was not set in stone. Lin Yu had to be prepared for every possible situation. He had already completed this step perfectly. As for whether it would proceed smoothly, it would depend on the situation on Hao Yan the Great's side. Every time Hao Yan the Great's strength increased, the chances of accidents occurring in the plan would increase. But of course, Lin Yu wasn't just relying on luck. What he was doing now was to come up with solutions for all possible accidents. At the same time, the others were quietly staying in their rooms. To them, the only thing they could do now was to wait for Lin Yu's orders. They also believed that Lin Yu would arrange everything flawlessly, even if their target this time was the strongest person in the entire Dongsheng Precept domain. Time passed just like that. During the time that Lin Yu and the others were staying in their rooms, the maids would bring them precious delicacies every day. Yang Qingsong also came once to tell Lin Yu that he had arranged for the vitreous vitality pill to be auctioned in the near future. In the morning 3 days later, Yang Qingsong once again came to Lin Yu's room. This time, he came to lead Lin Yu and the others to participate in the auction. According to the previous arrangement, the vitreous vitality pill would be auctioned today. Although Yang Qingsong had not figured out what Lin Yu's plan was, the vitreous vitality pill from before had been inspected by the pill appraiser at the auction. It was indeed the vitreous vitality pill without a doubt, which made Yang Qingsong even more puzzled. However, his life was now in Lin Yu's hands, so Yang Qingsong did not dare to ask rashly. "Sir, your vitreous vitality pill will be auctioned this morning." After entering Lin Yu's room, Yang Qingsong lowered his head and said respectfully. If the others in the Dongsheng Precept domain saw this scene, their jaws would drop to the ground in shock. Yang Qingsong was the city lord of Dao City and the second strongest person in the Dongsheng Precept domain. He was usually very arrogant, but when facing Lin Yu, he behaved like a servant. Lin Yu, who was cultivating with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes when he heard this. Will the Hao Tian Emperor be present at today's auction? Lin Yu naturally hoped that the Hao Tian Emperor would come to the auction personally. That way, he would be able to know the extent of the plan more clearly and save a lot of trouble. Yang Qingsong immediately nodded. I think so. Some precious treasures have occasionally appeared at the auction since the day before yesterday. The Hao Tian Emperor has also been here for 2 consecutive days. If nothing goes wrong, he will also come today. Okay. Lin Yu stood up from behind the table and called the others from their rooms. After arriving at Lin Yu's room, Yuji Kitami and the others could not help but feel a little excited. They knew that under Lin Yu's plan, today would be a very exciting day. Perhaps the Dongxing Precept domain would change owners from now on. Although Lin Yu did not mention how he would deal with the Hao Tian Emperor, Yuji Kitami and the others knew that with Lin Yu's character, he would not simply teach the Hao Tian Emperor a lesson. Moreover, Lin Yu had already stayed here for a few days to carry out this plan. Leaving empty-handed did not fit Lin Yu's style of doing things. After everyone gathered, Lin Yu did not say much. He only asked Yang Qingsong to arrange for someone to lead them to the auction. Although Yang Qingsong wanted to personally lead Lin Yu and the others there, he was rejected by Lin Yu. To others, having the city lord of Dao City personally lead the way might be a very precious plan. However, to Lin Yu, this would only cause them unnecessary trouble. With Yang Qingsong's status, everyone at the auction knew him. Once Lin Yu and the others were brought to the auction by Yang Qingsong, coupled with Yang Qingsong's respectful attitude in front of Lin Yu, they would definitely become the focus of the entire auction. At that time, if the Hao Tian Emperor noticed this scene, he would definitely be a little vigilant. After all, in the entire Dongxing Precept domain, no one was worthy of Yang Qingsong's treatment. Even the Hao Tian Emperor did not have a superior and subordinate relationship with Yang Qingsong. Do what you usually do. Don't communicate with us during the auction. When they were about to set off, Lin Yu instructed Yang Qingsong lightly. Yes, sir. Yang Qingsong quickly responded. No matter how stupid he was, he realized that Lin Yu planned to take action against the Hao Tian Emperor today. The previous arrangement was also to avoid arousing the Hao Tian Emperor's suspicion. After Yang Qingsong sent a voice transmission, a man in black came to the guest room. Sir, he is my personal guard. No one outside knows his identity. I asked him to lead you there. Okay. Under the guidance of the man in black, Lin Yu and the others quietly left through a secret passage in the city lord's mansion. It was a secret passage that led directly to the nearby city. After exiting, it was a small road with no one on the side. Lin Yu and the others blended into the crowd on the main road and rushed toward the auction without attracting any attention. This was because it happened to be the eve of the auction. Most of the people on the road in Dao City were going to participate in the auction. Lin Yu and the others followed the crowd and easily arrived near the auction. When they arrived near the auction, the man in black left alone. Yang Qingsong had assigned him the task of escorting Lin Yu and the others to the auction. Naturally, he would not do anything unnecessary. It was the same for Lin Yu and the others. Without anyone leading them, it was safest for them to enter the auction by themselves. Chapter 967. The auction was held in a huge building, and there were many people lining up to enter. Of course, the auction was held once every 10 years. As the largest auction in the Dongxing Dao domain, it was naturally not open to just anyone. As far as the eye could see, the people lining up outside the auction house were all holding a golden card. This golden card was the entry ticket for this auction. Only those who held the entry ticket could enter the auction. Moreover, each entry ticket could only be used once. In addition, the price of the entry ticket was very high. Most of the people who participated in the auction would check the list provided by the auction house. They would only participate in the auction if there was something they liked among the treasures that would be auctioned on that day. Lin Yu and company stood in the queue with the entry tickets in their hands. Their entry tickets were bought with dazzling bot. Previously, Yang Qingsong had suggested to provide them with the entry tickets, but Lin Yu did not take them from him. As the city lord of Dao City, Yang Qingsong naturally had some privileges. For example, the auction would send him a free entry ticket. However, those entry tickets were usually given to powerful figures. The seats provided on the entry tickets were different from ordinary seats. Those seats were very easy to attract attention, which would only be bad for Lin Yu's plan. The people who were queuing around also looked excited as they discussed with their companions beside them. Today's auction will have the divine sword forged by Master Long. I heard that using this sword in the 10,000 souls realm can even fight across a small realm. I'm afraid many people are aiming for that sword. Indeed, Master Long is very famous. That sword will definitely be auctioned for a sky-high price. Speaking of today's auction item, there's also a glazed mental nurturing pill. That's a pill that has been lost in history. I didn't expect to see it here. That's right. That pill is really hard to come by in 1,000 years. Master Long's divine sword will definitely be sold in the future. It's hard to say if there will be any more glazed mental nurturing pills in the future. I wonder who will get it in the end. Don't think about it. These treasures are for those important figures to compete with each other. It has nothing to do with us. That's true. Even though the glazed mental nourishing pill was only a grade 8 pill, its effects were extremely unique. It was a very rare pill that could strengthen one's divine sense. This kind of pill was extremely rare, and the pill recipe was basically extinct. Once it appeared, it would attract countless people to fight over it. Lin Yu smiled faintly when he heard the discussions around him. Sure enough, in just 2 to 3 days, the news of the glazed mental nourishing pill had already spread. Looking at the current situation, the Supreme Sky Emperor must have also noticed the news of the glazed vitality pill. Previously, during the alchemy conference, Lin Yu had already observed from the Clear Sky Emperor that his control of spiritual force was not exquisite. Therefore, now that such a heaven-defying pill like the glazed spiritual nourishing pill had appeared, the Supreme Sky Emperor would definitely make a move. Not long after, Lin Yu and the others lined up at the entrance of the auction. Although there were many people outside the auction, the people managing the auction were clearly aware of this. They had set up more than 10 checkpoints at the entrance of the auction, and the speed at which the tickets were checked was also very fast. "Hello, please show me your tickets," a woman wearing the white uniform of the auction house said. Okay. After Lin Yu and the others showed their tickets, they successfully entered the auction. Following the markings on the tickets and the instructions of the auction house, Lin Yu and the others arrived at the seats they had purchased. When they were seated, the auction house was already crowded with people. It was very noisy. In front of the auction house, there was a platform that was about 10 feet long. That was where the auction items were displayed. However, the auction had not started yet, so the platform was still empty. Not far from the platform, there were some very special seats. They were different from the seats Lin Yu and the others were sitting in. There were some precious spiritual fruits placed there, and behind each seat stood an auction house attendant. Those seats were prepared for people of high status. For example, the tickets that Yang Qingsong had obtained earlier had their seat numbers engraved in that area. Suddenly, the noise in the auction house quieted down. Following that, an aura appeared. Although the owner of the aura had restrained himself slightly, everyone could feel a strong pressure from the aura. Lin Yu turned his head and saw a man with a solemn expression walk in from the entrance of the auction house. This person was the Haotian Emperor, whom Lin Yu had met once before. For a moment, everyone in the auction house looked at him. The Haotian Emperor did not notice Lin Yu's gaze at all and walked straight to his seat. Lin Yu looked at the Haotian Emperor's figure and smiled faintly. At the same time, the Haotian Emperor paused and looked back at the seats behind him. Just then, he suddenly felt an indescribable aura. For some reason, his heart throbbed. However, there were tens of thousands of seats in the auction house. Even with his strength, the Haotian Emperor could not see the faces of all the people participating in the auction. After a while, the Haotian Emperor did not find anything. He could only look away and walk back to his seat. Did he sense it wrong? The Haotian Emperor thought to himself. After all, his current strength was different from before. Those who could barely be considered his opponents in the past had been left far behind by him. There were probably not many people in this world who could threaten him, and those people would not appear here. The Haotian Emperor shook his head and threw these thoughts to the back of his head. There were several items that he wanted in today's auction. The most important thing now was to get those items. On the other side, Lin Yu noticed the Hao-Ian Emperor's actions and frowned. It seemed that the Platycodon grandiflorum was right. The Hao-Ian Emperor had already come into contact with that realm. What was exposed was not his true strength. Otherwise, the Hao-Ian Emperor would not have sensed anything amiss in the situation earlier. Then, Lin Yu smiled again, without the slightest trace of worry on his face. The stronger the Hao-Ian Emperor was, the more disadvantageous it would be for them. However, Lin Yu had already considered the possibility of this happening. It was not that he did not have a countermeasure. After the Hao-Ian Emperor arrived, a few more groups of people entered the auction house. Among them were Yang Qing-song and Yang Luo. However, the two of them directly walked to the high-class seats near the high platform. Their behavior was the same as before. They did not look for Lin Yu and the others. Soon, the auction house was basically full. The number of people entering gradually decreased. The auction was about to begin. Chapter 968. Accompanied by the melodious sound of a bell, the lights in the auction house dimmed. Then, bursts of light illuminated the high platform in front of the auction house. A man in white walked up to the high platform under everyone's gaze. Good morning, everyone. I am the host of this auction. The auction will now officially begin. The man in white faced everyone who was participating in the auction and spoke in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. Although his voice was not loud, it was cleverly transmitted to everyone's ears through some kind of equipment set up in the auction house. As soon as he finished speaking, an attendant pushed a cart over. There was an auction item on the cart that was covered by a piece of red cloth. Let's take a look at the first auction item, the man in white said with a smile as the cart stopped in front of him. Then, he lifted the red cloth on the cart. This auction item is an ice marrow flower. After our appraisal, it is well preserved and has reached 1,000 years old. The starting price is 50 million yaobot. Each bid must be at least 2 million yaobot. On the tray of the cart, an ice blue flower that looked like an ice sculpture was blooming. After the red cloth was lifted, waves of cold air began to spread out. Everyone in the auction house could feel an intense chill emanating from the ice essence flower. This was due to the large space within the auction house. If they were in a sealed room, the chill emanating from the ice essence flower could even harm some of the weaker individuals. Oh my God, it's actually an ice marrow flower. This kind of flower only appears in places with extremely cold environments. In order to find it, one needs not only strength, but also extremely good luck. Don't make a fuss. The list released before the auction recorded that there would be an ice marrow flower today. Don't tell me you didn't see it. Although the ice marrow flower is extremely rare, it doesn't seem to have many uses. It is widely known that it can be used to refine the lustrous ice pill. In that case, only alchemists would bid for the ice marrow flower, and they would be of a higher grade. After seeing the first auction item appear, the auction house was immediately filled with noise. However, there were not too many surprise voices because some of the higher quality items that would appear in the auction had already been displayed on the list of auction items. Everyone already knew about some of the auction items in advance. At this moment, a rough voice sounded. 55 million. This voice seemed to be the start of the bidding. Soon after, the voices of bids continued to appear one after another. 58 million, 65 million, 93 million. In just a few breaths of time, the price of the ice essence flower had risen to twice the starting price. However, when the price reached this level, many people gave up competing. Only 4 people were still persisting. 120 million. With the last bid, the ice essence flower was won by a white-haired old man. For the discussions of the surrounding people, Lin Yu knew that this old man was a grade 8 alchemist and was quite famous in the Dongshengdao region. After the old man won the bid for the ice marrow flower, he did not continue to stay in the venue. Instead, he left with the few people beside him. From the looks of it, he intended to directly hand over the ice essence flower to the auction house and was not interested in the subsequent auction items. No one was surprised by this because many people were like this. They only had their eyes on one item in an auction or they didn't have enough money to buy one. Although the auction of the ice essence flower seemed to be very competitive, it didn't cause much of an impact in the venue. This was because although the ice essence flower was rare and had few uses, most people did not bid. Furthermore, although the auction price of more than 100 million Yao baht was not low, it was definitely not considered high here. Compared to this, more people were looking at the man in white, looking forward to the appearance of the next auction item. There wasn't much silence. Soon, the next auction item was sent to the man in white. After the red cloth was lifted, the man in white introduced the item in the same tone as before. The second auction item is a piece of defensive equipment. It's normally charged with glory aura so that it can withstand damage at critical moments. If it is fully charged, it can withstand at least 3 attacks from the 10,000 souls realm. The weaker the attack, the more it can withstand. However, one thing to note is that if you continue to use it after the charge is exhausted, there is a high chance that it will be damaged. The starting price is 100 million Yao baht. Each bid must not be less than 5 million Yao baht. Although this defensive equipment had many restrictions, the moment the man in white finished speaking, there was an endless stream of bids in the venue. 110 million Yao baht, 140 million Yao baht, 200 million Yao baht. The price instantly soared to 200 million Yao baht and showed no signs of stopping. Clearly, compared to the ice essence flower, this defensive equipment was more popular. Not only were there more people bidding, but the speed at which the price rose was also extremely fast. 10 breaths later, 350 million Yao baht. In the VIP seats near the high platform, a middle-aged man shouted. The moment this price came out, the venue fell into silence. For a moment, no one bid with him. On the high platform, the man in white also began to speak. 350 million Yao baht once. 350 million Yao baht twice. Congratulations to this mister for successfully winning the bid. In the end, this defensive equipment was bought by a middle-aged man for 350 million Yao baht. The man's face was filled with excitement. From a middle-aged man's aura, it could be seen that his strength was at the late stage of the 10,000 souls realm. This defensive equipment that could withstand several attacks from the 10,000 souls realm was very suitable for him. At this moment, the third auction item appeared on the high platform. The third auction item is the pill formula, the primordial divine elephant pill, a 7th grade pill. Its effect is to temporarily increase one's strength by a huge amount. The starting price is 500 million Yao baht. Each bid must not be less than 10 million Yao baht. This auction item finally caused a heated discussion in the venue. Pill formulas were extremely precious no matter where they were. Furthermore, this was a 7th grade pill formula. Even though the starting price was 500 million Yao baht, there were still many people who were eager to show off their skills. Most of these people were alchemists. Although some were not alchemists, their identities were related to alchemists. 1 billion Yao baht. The first bid doubled the previous price, but the atmosphere in the venue was not cold at all. Following that, another group of people began to bid. 1 billion Yao baht. 5 billion Yao baht. The bidding time this time was clearly longer than the previous few times. It was not until an incense stick's worth of time that the venue gradually quieted down. In the end, the primordial divine elephant pill formula was bought by an old man for 53 billion Yao baht. Chapter 969. After that, more than 10 auction items were auctioned consecutively, but none of them exceeded the price of the previous pill formula. However, when one of the auction items was displayed, it immediately caused a stir in the audience. It was a black longsword that emitted a cold light. It feels so sharp. Is this the divine sword that Master Long forged? Just looking at it from this distance makes my hair stand on end. Master Long really lives up to his reputation. Is there any need to say more about Master Long's attainments in forging? He's definitely the #1 person in our Dong, Sheng, Dao territory. I wonder how high Master Long's divine sword will be sold for this time. We'll just take a look at this kind of treasure. Even if we get our hands on it, we won't be able to keep it with our strength. For a moment, there was a flurry of discussion in the venue. Everyone's gaze was on the sword on the high platform. Even the clear sky emperor looked over and stared at the black longsword. He naturally knew of Master Long's reputation. Furthermore, Master Long had a strange habit of never selling in private. All of his weapons were sold through auctions. Even the Clear Sky Emperor could not use his status to intimidate someone like Master Long. He had already heard of the divine sword that Master Long was going to sell this time. Even if someone of his strength obtained it, he would be able to obtain a significant improvement. Thus, he had already arranged for people to prepare to bid for this divine sword in advance. After all, with the Clear Sky Emperor's status, it was not suitable for him to bid for it. Looking at the black longsword on the stage, Lin Yu raised his eyebrows. From the moment this sword appeared, Lin Yu felt its aura in the venue. It was an incomparably sharp aura that seemed to be able to cut through anything. Young Master Qin, this sword seems to be very powerful. Beima Yu's eyes widened in surprise. As a member of the four great clans, she had naturally seen many treasures. However, she had never seen a weapon comparable to this sword in the Beima clan's treasury. From this, it could be seen how powerful this divine sword that came from Master Long was. Indeed, Ning Kikyo, who was standing by the side, spoke up when he overheard their conversation. That Master Long is very famous. Although I haven't seen him before, I've heard about him. The weapons he makes can be said to be hard to find even with 10,000 gold. At this moment, the man in white on the high platform said aloud, "Everyone should have already understood, but I still have to give a brief introduction. This sword is called Soulbreaker. It was personally forged by Master Long. Its blade is so sharp that it can cut through glory chi. What's even more powerful is that this sword's attack can directly affect one's divine sense, causing irreversible damage to it. Everyone knows that Master Long's works are expensive. The starting price for this sword is 2 billion, and each increment must not be less than 100 million. Before he finished speaking, there were already people vying to be the first to bid. 5 billion. 7 billion. From the position of the voice, it could be seen that everyone participating in the auction was in the VIP seats. This price had already exceeded the range of ordinary people. Those who could take out more than 2 billion glory baht were all upper echelons or experts of certain factions. Before the auction started, the auction had already sent out tickets for these people. When the bidding reached 5 billion, the speed of the price increase slowed down significantly. At this price, even for those people, it was not a small sum of money. Only an old man in red, a beautiful woman, and a middle-aged man were still bidding. Lin Yu and the others also knew their identities from the nearby discussions. The old man in red and the woman were both people from other regions and were well-known experts in their respective territories. However, although the middle-aged man was in the VIP seats, no one knew his identity. Lin Yu glanced at the middle-aged man and guessed his identity. Previously, Yang Qingsong had said that the great emperor would not personally participate in the bidding, but would secretly entrust someone else to get what he wanted. 5 billion. When the middle-aged man said this price, the other two gave up the idea of competing. Firstly, although the Soulbreaker sword was powerful, it was only worth about this much. If they continued to raise the price, it would not be worth it even if they obtained it. Another reason was that this middle-aged man, a person they had never seen before, could take out such a large sum of money. His identity was definitely not simple. If it was really related to that person, even if they obtained this divine sword, it was still a problem whether they could leave the Dong Shangdao domain. In the end, the middle-aged man won the Soulbreaker sword at the price of 450,000 glory baht. After that, the middle-aged man quickly left the venue. At the same time, the glazed mental nourishment pill that Lin Yu had previously put up was also sent to the stage. The red cloth that isolated the aura was lifted, and the auction hall was immediately filled with a rich pill fragrance. This must be the glazed mental nourishment pill. Just smelling this aura makes me feel invigorated, as expected of a legendary pill. If I could smell this aura every day, my spiritual force might increase by itself. I wonder who auctioned this pill. Such a powerful pill, and they did not keep it for themselves. What a waste. Lin Yu looked at the Hao Tian Emperor and saw a look of desire in his eyes. Indeed, just as he had imagined, even the Hao Tian Emperor needed a pill like the glazed mental nourishment pill. The auction item this time is the glazed mental nourishment pill. After our appraisal, the quality of this pill is very perfect. There is no loss of medicinal efficacy. The starting price is 1.5 billion glory baht. Each bid must not be less than 50 million glory baht. After the white-robed man finished his introduction, he shouted loudly. The auction begins. With the appearance of this sentence, a new round of competition began once again. More than 10 people in the VIP seats stood up to bid for the glazed mental nourishment pill. The original starting price of 1.5 billion glory baht rose instantly. To these people, although the soul breaker from before was powerful, it wasn't the only one. Master Long would create new weapons for auction every once in a while. Moreover, weapons were just external objects. In the process of battle, they could be lost or damaged. However, pills were different. After consuming them, they would be completely converted into a part of one's strength. 2 billion, 8 billion, 3 billion. This time, after the price rose to 3 billion glory baht, there were still some people who were bidding with no intention of backing down. Obviously, the glazed mental nourishment pill was much more attractive to them than the soul breaker. Chapter 970. Just as the VIP seats were in a frenzy, competing with each other for the pill, Hao Tian the Emperor was still calm and did not show any signs of making a move. However, Lin Yu knew that there must be someone sent by Hao Tian the Emperor among the bidders. In less than 30 minutes, the price of the vitreous cultivation pill had exceeded the price of the soul-breaking pill, reaching a sky-high price of 5 billion. This price had far exceeded the real value of an 8th-grade elixir. Even if it was an extremely rare 9th-grade elixir, only a part of it could be sold at such a high price. However, the special effect and rarity of the vitreous cultivation pill determined that its price was far higher than that of ordinary elixirs. Until now, there were still several bidders who were raising the price. 2 billion. A young man in a black robe shouted loudly. Then he turned to the other bidders in the VIP seats who had not given up yet. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm currently cultivating a cultivation art that requires me to use it with my divine sense. This glazed, soul-nourishing pill is extremely important to me. If you're willing to part with it, I'll definitely reward you handsomely in the future. After saying that, the young man in the black robe clasped his fist to the bidders. Hearing this, there was a burst of discussion in the auction. I know this person. He is Zheng Xiuqin from the Ghost Realm. His father is an expert of the Spirit King realm. No wonder he dares to say that. That's right. And I heard that he has reached the late stage of the 10,000 soul realm. He has such a cultivation at such a young age. His talent is really terrifying. Maybe the others will give him some face and give him the vitreous cultivation pill. It's not that simple. Look at the remaining bidders. None of them are simple. Since it is something they want, how can they give it to someone else? Yes. When the people who were about to bid heard this, one of them hesitated for a moment before nodding his head. Well, for the sake of my friendship with your father, I will not compete with you for this vitreous cultivation pill. Thank you, Uncle Wei. Zheng Xiuqin was delighted and thanked him. Then he looked at the others. At this time, except for the one who withdrew, there were 5 bidders, including Zheng Xiuqin. One of them noticed Zheng Xiuqin's gaze and sneered. Brat, you're dreaming. However, I'm taking this pill today. Even if your father comes here personally, I won't let him have it. The rest of the people were also expressionless. They had no intention of stopping. Seeing this scene, Zheng Xiuqin's expression became somewhat unsightly. When he was in the ghost realm, there was the existence of his father, and his own strength was not weak, so no one did not give him some face. But here, these people actually did not put him in their eyes. Although Zheng Xiuqin was furious, he did not speak up because he knew that the person who mocked him was as strong as his father. He was also a Spirit King realm expert and could not be offended. Seeing that there were no more disputes, the man in white on the high platform resumed the auction. 2 billion going once. 2 billion going twice. 52 I bid 5 billion. The person who mocked Zheng Xiuqin shouted. At the same time, he looked at Zheng Xiuqin with a provocative gaze. Hearing this price, Zheng Xiuqin sighed and sat down silently. The glory bot he had with him could not support him to continue bidding. Although he did not have 5 billion glory bot, the final price of the vitreous vitality pill was obviously more than that. Sure enough, in the next moment, another voice was heard. 8 billion, a man said in a low voice. At this time, Lin Yu heard some people discussing this man from the nearby audience. Similar to the person who bid for the soul breaker pill, this man's identity was unknown. He's quite cautious. Lin Yu smiled faintly. Not only did the Clear Sky Emperor not personally bid at the auction, but he also delegated this task to others. He also arranged it very well. He did not let the same person bid for all the auction items he wanted, for fear of attracting suspicion. The auction continued. 6 billion, 7 billion, 9 billion. The price of the vitreous vitality pill rose steadily, and the atmosphere in the auction hall became extremely heated. Even in previous auctions, there were very few items that could be auctioned at such a high price. After this auction ended, it would probably lead to another round of heated discussions in the outside world. Everyone in the auction hall exclaimed that such a high price had appeared. At the same time, they were envious of the person who had consigned this pill for auction. With such a large sum of money, even after deducting the auction commission, it was still a huge sum of money. Wouldn't that mean that he could spend it however he wanted? 5 billion going once. 5 billion. At this time, there were only 2 people left in the bidding. Other than the man from before, there was also a woman in red. The woman in red's forehead was dripping with sweat. Her expression was solemn as she looked nervously at the man not far away. This was because she was the one who had bid 5 billion. However, this was also her final bid. She had only brought this amount of glory bot to this auction. Even though she was the sect leader of a large sect, this price was extremely high for her. Hearing this bid, the man said calmly, 10 billion. Instantly, everyone in the auction hall gasped. They had actually witnessed a pill that was worth 10 billion glory bot with their own eyes. This price had far exceeded the range of a grade 8 pill. From this, it could be seen that these experts valued their spiritual will. However, because they couldn't cultivate on their own, they could only rely on pills like the vitreous vitality pill. The woman in red sat down in her seat in a daze. She cultivated the sect's secret technique. At her level, she could no longer rely on her glory chi to break through. She had to rely on her spiritual will. Therefore, when she heard that the vitreous vitality pill would appear at the auction, she immediately brought all the glory bot in her sect and rushed here. She didn't expect that she wouldn't be able to successfully bid for it. When the man called out a price of 10 billion, no one in the auction hall could compete with him. After a few confirmations by the man in white, the vitreous vitality pill was finally successfully auctioned. Seeing this, the man quickly left the auction hall like the previous person. The audience in the auction hall didn't have any doubts about the man's actions. After all, the item he had bid for was so precious. It was understandable that he was in a hurry to leave. The auction continued. However, after the thrilling bidding at the beginning, the auction seemed a little boring. Before it ended, some of the audience had already left. Chapter 971. 2 hours later, Lin Yu and the others walked out of the auction house. The auction had just ended, but the news about the vitreous vitality pill had already spread throughout the city. As soon as he walked out of the auction house, Lin Yu heard some people talking excitedly. You didn't see it, but the scene was too shocking. 10 billion, that's 10 billion. That's ridiculous. An 8th realm medicinal pill, though of a high rank, shouldn't be sold for such a price. That's what you don't understand. Medicinal pills of the same rank have different qualities. This vitreous vitality pill is one of the best medicinal pills of the 8th realm. Its ability to strengthen one's spiritual energy is already better than many ninth realm medicinal pills. Plus, this medicinal pill has been extinct for a long time. It will never appear again. I see. Hearing this, Lin Yu smiled faintly. To others, the vitreous vitality pill was indeed a medicinal pill that had been extinct for a long time. Nobody knew the recipe. However, Ling Xian, who received the Alchemy King's inheritance, had dozens of similar recipes. In other words, if Lin Yu wanted to, he could create dozens of extinct medicinal pills. Lin Yu said to the people around him, "You guys go back to the city leader's palace first. I'll go back in a bit." Originally, he planned to bring Platycodon grandiflorum and the others with him. However, after discovering how Tian the Emperor's true capabilities, he changed his mind. Okay. Bai Geo and Platycodon grandiflorum nodded. They knew that Lin Yu had other plans. He had his reasons for asking them to go back first. As for Yuji Kitami, she walked up and hugged Lin Yu. She whispered into his ear, "Be careful." Lin Yu waved his hand and disappeared in a flash. He didn't attract any attention. Seeing this, Beima Yu and the other two also turned around and walked back the way they came. After a few breaths, Lin Yu arrived near a courtyard. This courtyard was close to the street, and there were dozens of similar courtyards around it. They were not eye-catching at all. However, Lin Yu was able to sense the spiritual imprint he had left on the glazed, soul-nourishing pill in this ordinary courtyard. No one would have guessed that in this small courtyard, there was actually a medicinal pill worth 10 billion. Lin Yu extended his spiritual force into the courtyard and immediately discovered that there was an array formation hidden around the courtyard. It was specifically used for detection and detection. If it was before Lin Yu had broken through to the Spirit King realm, he might have needed to spend a lot of effort to break the array. However, with the current strength of Lin Yu's spiritual force, he was able to break through the array in an instant without causing any ripples. After his spiritual sense entered the courtyard, Lin Yu sensed the auras of a few people. One of them was the Supreme Sky Emperor. Lin Yu raised his eyebrows. It seemed that he had guessed correctly. The Supreme Sky Emperor was behind the person who had won the bid for the glazed, soul-nourishing pill. Not only that, but the person who had won the bid for the Soul Breaker Sword was also in the courtyard. There were also a few other people who had participated in the auction. "Sir, this is the Soul Breaker Sword that you entrusted me with." The Supreme Sky Emperor took the soul-breaking sword and examined it. He revealed a satisfied smile. As he had expected, this sword was extremely special. It was indeed Master Long's work. Next, the auction items were presented to the Supreme Sky Emperor one by one, including the glazed, soul-nourishing pill. "Sir, the reward this time." The person who had won the bid for the Supreme Sky Emperor seemed to be the leader of the group. He asked the Supreme Sky Emperor with a smile on his face. Don't worry." The Supreme Sky Emperor replied with a smile. "I'll arrange for someone to send the reward to you later. You can go back first." "Got it." After hearing the Supreme Sky Emperor's promise, the man's face lit up. With the reward this time, they would not have to worry about money for the rest of their lives. As for the Supreme Sky Emperor's words, he completely believed them. After all, although the reward was great, it was nothing to the Supreme Sky Emperor. He would not lie to them. The man turned around and was about to leave with the few people beside him. Suddenly, there was a piercing sound. The few of them didn't have time to react. Suddenly, they felt a sharp pain behind them. They all fell to the ground. Looking at the few corpses with their heads chopped off, the Supreme Sky Emperor smiled coldly. "How foolish. You know something so important, and yet you still want to leave alive." At that moment, there were only two people left in the courtyard. The Supreme Sky Emperor and a man wearing a black mask beside him. Clean up their remaining forces. Don't leave any traces." "Yes, sir." A sinister voice was heard, and the man in the black mask disappeared from the courtyard. The Supreme Sky Emperor reached out and destroyed all the corpses on the ground. He heaved a sigh of relief. He had found these people from a small force in another region. He had entrusted them to bid for the items that the Supreme Sky Emperor wanted. The Supreme Sky Emperor had done similar things many times. He had used this method to participate in every auction in the past. He had never been discovered by anyone, because every time he participated in the auction, the Hao Tian Emperor would clean up all the people who participated in the auction on his behalf and their forces. There were countless forces like this in the 3 realms and 5 regions. Even if they disappeared, they would not attract any attention. Everyone would think that this force had offended an enemy and was destroyed. No one would link it to the Supreme Sky Emperor. The quality of this auction is indeed very high. However, I can't participate in every auction personally. That would be meaningless. The Supreme Sky Emperor looked at the auction items in front of him and smiled as he muttered to himself. There was no need to mention the other auction items. The Broken Soul was personally created by Master Long. Its special effects were not to be underestimated, and this Glazed Vitality Pill was even more of a surprise. The Supreme Sky Emperor knew that he had just broken through and had not stabilized his realm. However, he had already realized from this new realm that if he wanted to continue improving, the strength of his divine consciousness was very important. With a thought, the Clear Sky Emperor opened the bottle containing the glazed, soul-nourishing pill. Immediately, a strong pill fragrance filled the air, causing his divine consciousness to tremble. Just smelling it at a close distance could cause such a huge reaction. If it was consumed and absorbed, how shocking would the changes be? The Supreme Sky Emperor could not wait to consume the pill immediately. However, he was naturally a cautious person since he had cultivated to his current realm. The Supreme Sky Emperor closed his eyes and carefully felt the pill in his hand. After checking it for a while, he did not find anything unusual. Only the pill fragrance of the Vitreous Vitality Pill kept stimulating his nerves. After checking it, the Supreme Sky Emperor did not dawdle. He directly threw the pill into his mouth and swallowed it. Immediately, a strong medicinal effect exploded in his body. Chapter 972. The Clear Sky Emperor quickly calmed himself down and tried to absorb the effects of the vitreous, nourishing pill. However, when he closed his eyes and used the glory chi in his body to guide the medicinal effects, the Clear Sky Emperor found that the vitreous, nourishing pill had no effect. The Clear Sky Emperor suddenly realized that there was not much medicinal effects in his body. There were only tiny bits of medicinal effects floating around his abdomen. What was going on? The Clear Sky Emperor was stunned. He did not know why this was happening. Although the vitreous nourishing pill had long disappeared from the world, and the Clear Sky Emperor had never taken it before, the effects of the vitreous nourishing pill had been recorded. It was impossible for it to only have this little effect. Could it be that the vitreous nourishing pill he took was a fake pill? The Clear Sky Emperor was furious. Someone actually dared to deceive him. That person was truly not afraid of death. However, the Clear Sky Emperor knew that this was not the time to think about it. He released his divine telekinesis to sense the changes in his body. As expected, in less than 2 breaths of time, the medicinal effects of the vitreous nourishing pill had been completely absorbed by him. However, the medicinal effects only increased his divine telekinesis by less than 1%. It was far from the real effect of the vitreous nourishing pill. That tiny bit of medicinal effects came from the surface of the vitreous nourishing pill. It originally covered the entire surface of the pill, as if it was just to hide the essence of the pill, so that others would think that it was the real vitreous nourishing pill. In the end, it was indeed so. From the pill appraisers at the auction to the Clear Sky Emperor himself, no one could see through the disguise. The Clear Sky Emperor only realized it after taking the pill. Just as the Clear Sky Emperor opened his eyes in anger and was about to call someone to investigate the matter, a terrifying power suddenly burst out from his body, startling the Clear Sky Emperor. After the surface of the pill he took was absorbed, only an inconspicuous black ball was left. The Clear Sky Emperor originally thought that it was just a pile of useless medicinal dregs used to make up the numbers. However, the current changes made the Clear Sky Emperor have a bad premonition. Could it be that the pill he took was actually a poisonous pill? The Clear Sky Emperor did not have time to call for help. He immediately calmed his mind and prepared to expel the unknown thing from his body. But when he used his divine will to sense it, he found that the black thing had already begun to spread. How Tian Emperor felt a chill in his heart. He immediately activated his Yao Qi to move around his body. He wanted to seal that black thing and expel it from his body. But just as he was about to make his decision, he suddenly felt a chill behind him. Who is it? The Supreme Sky Emperor suddenly opened his eyes and turned around, assuming a defensive posture. There was actually someone who could pass through the array he had set up without alarming him. The newcomer was very strong. However, when the Supreme Sky Emperor saw the person behind him clearly, his eyes widened. "How could it be you?" Supreme Sky Emperor exclaimed in disbelief. "You look very surprised." Lin Yu crossed his arms and said indifferently. When Lin Yu saw the clear Sky Emperor consume the glaze spiritual pill, he knew that the opportunity he had been waiting for had arrived. Lin Yu snuck into the courtyard while the Supreme Sky Emperor was absorbing the pills. Just as he expected, even though the Supreme Sky Emperor had reached that level, he had lowered his guard to the lowest point after absorbing the pills and discovering the abnormality. That was why Lin Yu was able to sneak up behind him. "You did it? I see." No wonder the glaze spiritual pill appeared. Supreme Sky Emperor glared at Lin Yu angrily. After analyzing in his heart, he frowned. Supreme Sky Emperor had been paying attention to Lin Yu ever since the alchemy conference. After all, Lin Yu had killed 2 geniuses from the Dongshang Precept domain. Supreme Sky Emperor had to take revenge. However, what happened after that was beyond Supreme Sky Emperor's expectations. After the alchemy conference ended, Lin Yu obtained the Elixir King's inheritance and built a city on the primitive continent. Not long after, he broke through to the Elixir King realm. "You obtained the glaze spiritual pill recipe from the Elixir King's inheritance, right?" Supreme Sky Emperor asked in a low voice. Of course. Lin Yu smiled faintly and did not deny it. After today, Supreme Sky Emperor was no longer a threat to him. Supreme Sky Emperor's eyes narrowed when he heard Lin Yu's admission. He could see the confidence in Lin Yu's eyes. However, Lin Yu was only in the 10,000 spirits realm. Did he really think he could fight against Supreme Sky Emperor? Supreme Sky Emperor felt uneasy because the black substance in his body had not been removed. "Arrogant guy, with your strength, you can't threaten me at all," Supreme Sky Emperor said coldly. Then, a strong air wave swept out from his body. "I'll let you go today. Get lost." Supreme Sky Emperor pretended to be tough because he did not want to cause any unnecessary accidents by activating the Glory Chi before removing the black substance in his body. Lin Yu remained calm when he heard Supreme Sky Emperor's words. Supreme Sky Emperor was the one who made the glaze spiritual pill. How could he not know about it? Because of this, he could not let Supreme Sky Emperor have his way. "Cut the crap," Lin Yu said faintly. Then, a huge shadow appeared behind Lin Yu, causing ripples in the surrounding space. Fantasy Sky. After breaking through to the Spirit King realm, Azura's shadow had a great improvement. At the same time, Lin Yu stretched out his hands. 5 elemental palm. Garuda's power gathered in Lin Yu's hands. It was much stronger than when Lin Yu had used it before. After reaching the Spirit King realm, Lin Yu's strength, speed, and divine were much stronger than those in the same realm. His superpowers were also greatly improved. Facing Hao Tian Emperor, Lin Yu did not dare to be careless. Other than the 6-winged Divine King's shadow, this was the first expert above the Spirit King realm that he had fought. Lin Yu went all out as soon as he made his move. Time overlap. 100 times 5 elemental palm. A huge amount of glory chi gathered around Lin Yu, exuding a terrifying aura. Hao Tian Emperor was stunned at the sight of this. This kind of power, not to mention the myriad spirit realm, even in the Spirit King realm, no one could match it. The Supreme Sky Emperor shouted with a grave expression. Dao Technique Protection. A strange energy suddenly appeared from the clear Sky Emperor's body, protecting his entire body. Seeing Lin Yu's actions, Supreme Sky Emperor knew that if he did not defeat him, he would not get the time to remove the black substance in his body. He had to defeat Lin Yu first so that he could not interfere with him. After making up his mind, Supreme Sky Emperor decisively launched a counterattack. Chapter 973. Just as the Supreme Sky Emperor used that strange ability to protect himself, the attack of the Azura Shadow came crashing down. Bang, bang, bang. The gigantic black demonic palm landed on Hao Tian Emperor's body with a deafening sound. Clear Sky Emperor was shocked. He had overestimated Lin Yu's strength as much as possible, but he did not expect the strength of this attack to exceed his expectations. Lin Yu was so strong. Before Clear Sky Emperor could react, the hundredfold 5-elemental Dao Seal Palm arrived in front of him with a sharp aura. Clear Sky Emperor was stunned when he was hit. Such power! Clear Sky Emperor was then smashed into the ground by this terrifying power, creating a deep hole in the courtyard. Clear Sky Emperor lay in the deep hole with a look of disbelief. Puffed. Clear Sky Emperor spat out a mouthful of blood. Damn it! Clear Sky Emperor muttered to himself and then rushed out of the deep hole. He did not expect Lin Yu's attack to be so strong. By the time he realized it, it was already too late. That was why he was so heavily injured. Clear Sky Emperor knew that Lin Yu must have broken through to the Spirit King realm through the previous attack. Even so, there was an insurmountable gap between the Spirit King realm and the Emperor realm. Clear Sky Emperor rushed into the air and looked down at Lin Yu as he shouted, "Omniscient nature!" Suddenly, a majestic aura surrounded the entire space. A series of attacks that were invisible to the naked eye flew towards Lin Yu. In the face of such a strange attack, Lin Yu still looked calm and collected. Although he could not see Clear Sky Emperor's attack with his naked eye, Lin Yu's divine telekinesis was so strong that he could sense the location of the attacks. Eternal Night. Hao Tian Emperor had a cruel smile on his face. No matter how strong Lin Yu was, how could he defend against an attack that he couldn't even see? There was only one consequence if he took this attack head-on, and that was death. However, in the next moment, Clear Sky Emperor's vision turned pitch black. What's going on? The Supreme Sky Emperor was startled as he quickly looked around. But no matter where he looked, he could not see anything. There was only darkness. At this moment, he seemed to have lost all his senses. Beads of cold sweat seeped out of Hao Tian Emperor's forehead. Although the attack he released just now was invisible to the other party, it was extremely strange. But at the same time, there was a huge limitation. That was, the target of the attack had to be within his line of sight. Once the opponent left his line of sight, the attack would be easily neutralized. Sure enough, when the Supreme Heaven Emperor gradually regained consciousness, Lin Yu was standing on the ground, unharmed. Dying. Hao Tian Emperor's face was filled with anger. Although he couldn't see Lin Yu's cultivation, he was certain that Lin Yu hadn't reached Emperor Realm. But it was precisely this kind of strength that actually caused him to succumb several times in a row. The Supreme Sky Emperor clenched his right hand into a fist and attacked Lin Yu with all his might. This attack gathered his Taoist rhyme. Coupled with his Emperor Realm cultivation, it would definitely cause Lin Yu to die without a complete corpse. However, just as the Supreme Sky Emperor was about to attack Lin Yu, he froze on the spot. The golden Yao Qi on his fist was also slowly dissipating. Hao Tian Emperor's face was pale, and his heart throbbed intensely. In that instant, he suddenly lost control of his body. At this moment, when he probed his body with his divine telekinesis, he finally realized what the problem was. It turned out that the light that sealed the black substance in his body was constantly being extracted in the battle just now, and the seal was getting weaker and weaker. Finally, during his last attack, the black substance broke through the seal and spread to every part of his body. "What did you do to me?" Hao Tian Emperor slowly lowered his arm and asked with a grave expression. Although he had regained control of his body warned him when he planned to attack Lin Yu. If he really did that, he would die. Nothing. Hearing Hao Tian Emperor's question, Lin Yu smiled faintly. "I just added a restriction on you. and your life and death are in my hands, said Yifutian. Hao Tian Emperor's pupils shrank, and his expression turned ugly. This was because he knew that Lin Yu was probably not lying to him. The warning from his body explained everything. However, he did not dare to believe his own feelings at that time. He felt that everything was just his imagination. After all, he had never heard of anyone who could control an Emperor Realm cultivator. Seeing Hao Tian Emperor's expression, Lin Yu smiled faintly. Then, he raised his hand, and a scarlet line of chi shot from Lin Yu's hand toward Hao Tian Emperor's heart. Blood sacrifice, heart refinement. Hao Tian Emperor immediately felt his body turn cold, as if his life was really in Lin Yu's hands. Seeing this, Hao Tian Emperor had no choice but to believe it even if he did not want to. The truth was right in front of him. You win, Hao Tian Emperor said with an ashen face. What do you want? Hao Tian Emperor knew that Lin Yu did things cleanly. Just like when he killed the two geniuses from the Dongsheng Precept Domain during the alchemy conference, there was no hesitation. Since his life was in Lin Yu's hands now, Lin Yu must have other motives for not killing him immediately. Smart man. After hearing Hao Tian Emperor's question, Lin Yu clapped his hands and said, First, tell me everything you know about the six-winged Divine King. Hao Tian Emperor was stunned when he heard this question. He thought that Lin Yu would ask him to hand over all his belongings first. He did not expect this question. All of a sudden, the Clear Sky Emperor felt his heart shrink. Hao Tian Emperor raised his head and saw Lin Yu's calm gaze. He could not help but shiver. I don't have much of a relationship with the six-winged Divine King. After all, I'm from the primitive continent, and he's from the Heaven region. We've never contacted each other. A while ago, the six-winged Divine King contacted me and asked me to find the person who won first place in this sequence battle. He said that he would give me great benefits after I found him. Hao Tian Emperor lowered his head and said with a trembling voice. He was extremely domineering before, but that was because his status and strength were higher than others. No one could threaten him. However, now that his life was in Lin Yu's hands, Hao Tian Emperor was extremely afraid of Lin Yu. He was afraid that Lin Yu would destroy him completely if he was unhappy. Oh, Lin Yu was not too surprised when he heard this news. After all, Platycodon grandiflorum was the ruler of the demon region and had received the six-winged Divine King's orders. As the strongest person in the Dongsheng Precept Domain, Hao Tian Emperor naturally would not be left behind. The strongest people in the 5 regions of the primitive continent had probably all received the six-winged Divine King's orders. Chapter 974. I heard that person is called Lin Yu. I've sent people to search for him in the Dongsheng Dao territory, but they didn't find anything. In the end, I didn't waste any more time. In order to survive, the Supreme Heaven Emperor honestly told everything he knew. Lin Yu did not doubt his words. After all, the Supreme Heaven Emperor did not know Lin Yu well and had no idea where to start. He was not like Platycodon grandiflorum, who had planned to find clues related to Lin Yu from Baijio. Moreover, Lin Yu had also discovered from the previous exchange. Although the Supreme Heaven Emperor's current realm was not very stable, he was still an Emperor stage cultivator. Compared to Platycodon grandiflorum, he was much stronger. This was also why Lin Yu had changed his plan at the last minute after the auction ended and let Platycodon grandiflorum and the others return first. With their strength, they could not even take a single blow from the Supreme Heaven Emperor. Perhaps it was because of this that the six-winged Divine King was not as forceful as when he gave orders to Platycodon grandiflorum. Seeing that Lin Yu was still expressionless, the Supreme Heaven Emperor hurriedly continued. I really don't know anything else. I haven't even fought with him. However, from the aura I sensed earlier, I'm sure that even after breaking through, I still have no chance of winning against him. The Supreme Heaven Emperor's face was filled with fear when he mentioned the six-winged Divine King. Yes. Lin Yu nodded and then looked at him. Your life is in my hands now. However, you can continue to be a great emperor in the Dongsheng Dao territory like before. However, everything has a price. The Supreme Heaven Emperor raised his head in shock when he heard Lin Yu's words. He originally thought that after being controlled by Lin Yu would definitely take the Dongsheng Dao territory for himself and order him around as a slave. You know that I built a city, right? I know. Supreme Sky Emperor quickly nodded. The price you have to pay is to hand over resources to the Heavenly Alliance city every month. Not a single cent less. With that, Lin Yu took out a list and placed it in front of the Clear Sky Emperor. The Supreme Sky Emperor picked up the list and checked it carefully. He was pleasantly surprised, but also somewhat glad. Although the list required a lot of materials, it was not difficult to pay for them. Once a month, it was enough to use the power of the entire Dong Shengdao domain. From the looks of it, Lin Yu was planning to keep the materials that had been handed over to him for a long time. Otherwise, he could have completely plundered all the resources in the Dong Shengdao domain. Hao Tian Emperor was pleasantly surprised by this result. It was much better than what he had imagined. After the Supreme Sky Emperor agreed, Lin Yu smiled faintly and left the courtyard in a flash. This way, the Heavenly Alliance's daily income would increase by another portion. Of course, it was not that Lin Yu did not consider other possibilities. If the Supreme Sky Emperor had refused to give in and refused to agree, Lin Yu could have killed him and made Yang Qingsong the master of the Dong Shengdao domain. However, that did not happen, which saved Lin Yu a lot of effort. After seeing Lin Yu leave, Supreme Sky Emperor heaved a sigh of relief. Ever since he was defeated by Lin Yu, he had developed a fear of this man. Moreover, this man controlled his life and death. When Lin Yu was around, Supreme Sky Emperor did not even dare to breathe loudly. Under such circumstances, the Supreme Sky Emperor's previous desire to take revenge on Lin Yu because of the two geniuses in the Dongsheng Dao domain had vanished. What he hoped for now was that as long as he obediently handed in the resources every month, Lin Yu would always let him be the master of the Dong Shengdao domain. Just as the hidden danger of Supreme Sky Emperor was completely removed by Lin Yu, Yuji Kitami and the others were gathered in the guest room of the governor's mansion. Will Master Qin have an accident? Platycodon grandiflorum asked worriedly. Although she trusted Lin Yu before, after so long, Lin Yu still had not returned, which made her imagination run wild. Among them, other than Lin Yu, her cultivation realm was the highest. Therefore, she knew the power above the Spirit King realm the best. It was a brand new level. No matter how strong a Spirit King realm cultivator was, they could not resist that power when facing an Emperor realm cultivator. Although Lin Yu's combat strength was extremely high, he had just broken through to the Spirit King realm not long ago. If Supreme Sky Emperor really broke through to the Emperor realm, Lin Yu would definitely not be his match. Right now, Platycodon grandiflorum could only hope that Supreme Sky Emperor was still trapped at the peak of the Spirit King realm and had not completed his breakthrough. No, I believe in him. Yuji Kitami clenched her fists and said firmly. Baiju also nodded in agreement. He had been with Lin Yu the longest and knew what Lin Yu had done. He even knew Lin Yu's true identity. Therefore, White Nine was instead the one who was least worried among the few people. Suddenly, a flash of illusory light, and Lin Yu appeared in front of them. Seeing Lin Yu's figure, Yuji Kitami hurriedly walked forward and looked at him. You're not injured, are you? Of course not. Lin Yu smiled and touched Yuji Kitami's hair. Ning Jiko, who was standing at the side, said hesitantly, The Supreme Sky Emperor. Lin Yu turned his head and looked over. He's already under my control. In order to survive, he has to hand in supplies to the Sky Alliance regularly. Hearing Lin Yu's words, Platycodon grandiflorum patted her chest and sighed in relief. Fortunately, it seems that I guessed wrong. Fortunately, he hasn't broken through to the Spirit King realm. Lin Yu was stunned and then said aloud, You guessed right. He has indeed broken through. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked you to come back first and go alone. Everyone was stunned. Platycodon grandiflorum asked in disbelief with her eyes wide open. In other words, Supreme Sky Emperor already has the strength of an Emperor realm cultivator, but he's still no match for you. Platycodon grandiflorum couldn't believe her ears. Supreme Sky Emperor was really an Emperor Realm cultivator. What made it even more difficult for her to accept was that Lin Yu had defeated such a person. Moreover, judging from Lin Yu's current situation, there were no signs of injuries at all. Lin Yu easily defeated an Emperor Realm cultivator. Platycodon grandiflorum was very confused because this was far beyond her expectations of Lin Yu. It's just a small trick. Lin Yu smiled faintly and waved his hand. It seemed that he didn't take this matter to heart at all. Platycodon grandiflorum's heart was in turmoil when she heard this. He defeated an Emperor Realm cultivator with a small trick. Platycodon grandiflorum couldn't tell if Lin Yu was being humble or showing off. As expected of young Master Qin, Yuji Kitami heard the conversation between the two and didn't think too much about it. She simply thought that Lin Yu was powerful. With her current strength, she still didn't know what the strength of an Emperor Realm cultivator meant. All right, the matter of the Dongshan Dao territory has been settled. We should set off now, Lin Yu said to everyone. Chapter 975. To Lin Yu, the most important thing now was to find the great sun boundless Buddha. As for the Hao-Ian Emperor, it was just a small interlude. Got it. However, the auction is not over yet. The checkpoint near Dongshang Precept region. Bai Jiu recalled the reason why they had come to Dao City previously and could not help but remind him. That's easy. Lin Yu smiled faintly and then called the maidservant in. Find Yang Qing and ask him to come over. The maidservant was stunned when she heard that. She did not expect Lin Yu to be so domineering as to ask their city lord to come over directly. However, she suddenly recalled Yang Qing previous instructions. No matter what Lin Yu said, she had to listen to him. Yes, sir. The maidservant lowered her head and replied before leaving the room. Not long after, Yang Qing rushed over with a slightly anxious look on his face. Obviously, after knowing Lin Yu's instructions, he rushed over immediately. Sir, what are your orders? Yang Qing asked respectfully when he arrived in front of Lin Yu. Although he did not know that the Hao-Ian Emperor was also under Lin Yu's control, just the fact that his life was in Lin Yu's hands was enough for him to follow Lin Yu's lead. We're leaving Dongsheng Precept region now. Arrange the checkpoints outside, Lin Yu said quietly. I understand. I'll arrange it for you. Yang Qing immediately understood what Lin Yu meant. However, he still had some doubts in his heart. This was because the glazed vitality pill that Lin Yu had asked in the auction had been sold at a sky-high price today. Moreover, Lin Yu and the others had personally gone to the auction site today. However, it seemed that nothing unexpected had happened. Everything was no different from the usual auctions. Could it be that Lin Yu's previous plan had failed, so he wanted to leave Dongxing Precept? Sir, the Hao-Ian Emperor, Yang Qing said hesitantly. Yang Qing was still somewhat fearful of the Supreme Sky Emperor. After all, his strength was far inferior to the Supreme Sky Emperor. If Lin Yu's plan had failed and he was preparing to run away, then shouldn't he also consider this matter? Otherwise, if Hao-Tian Emperor found out about his relationship with Lin Yu, he would be in a bad situation. Hao-Tian Emperor, he's in a similar situation as you, Lin Yu said with a smile. With my situation? Hearing this answer, Yang Qing was stunned, but he quickly reacted. His life was now in Lin Yu's hands. Could it be that he was also thinking of this? Yang Qing could not help but ask, a trace of fear appearing on his face. Yes, Lin Yu nodded. After seeing Lin Yu's affirmation, Yang Qing was extremely shocked. The Supreme Sky Emperor was much stronger than him, but Yang Qing did not even know how he left Lin Yu's room. When he came back to his senses, he was already in the corridor. This person is too terrifying. Yang Qing could not help but murmur to himself. After falling into Lin Yu's hands, although he had been following Lin Yu's orders, it was not that he did not have other thoughts in his mind. He was still hoping that the Supreme Sky Emperor could kill Lin Yu and regain his freedom. However, the current situation was completely different from what he had imagined. The Supreme Sky Emperor had also fallen into Lin Yu's hands. Because of this, Yang Song completely put away his thoughts. As for whether Lin Yu was lying to him, Yang Song did not think about it. After all, he and the Supreme Sky Emperor could figure out this kind of thing by talking about it. Lin Yu would not use such a low-level method. 6 hours later, Lin Yu and the others boarded the warship and left Dao City. This time, because they had the certificate personally written by Yang Song, Lin Yu and the others easily passed through the checkpoint near the Eastern Victory Precept region. When the guards at the checkpoint saw the certificate, they did not have any intention of searching and directly let them pass. Inside the warship, Platycodon grandiflorum rearranged the sailing route. It was the shortest route from Dao City to their destination. According to this route, they only needed to pass through the western region and would reach their destination in a few days, at the place where the Mahavarakana Buddha resided. The few of them returned to their rooms and began to cultivate. Lin Yu had a lot of understanding of his body after breaking through to the Spirit King realm through the battle with the Supreme Sky Emperor. First, it was strength, speed, and divine will. Although Lin Yu had just broken through to the Spirit King realm, he was about the same as the Supreme Sky Emperor, who was in the Emperor realm. In terms of divine will, Lin Yu even surpassed the Supreme Sky Emperor by a lot. Lin Yu had no doubt that he could single-handedly crush the Supreme Sky Emperor if they were to compete with divine will alone. Although there was a slight difference in strength and speed, Lin Yu was not afraid of the Supreme Sky Emperor at all because of his enhanced divine powers after the breakthrough. In the previous battle, Lin Yu did not use the abilities he obtained from the 10,000 Souls seal. Instead, he completely relied on his own divine powers. He wanted to see how powerful his divine powers had become after the breakthrough. The result did not disappoint Lin Yu. Even though Lin Yu was a whole realm lower than the Supreme Sky Emperor, he still defeated him. Lin Yu had drugged the Supreme Sky Emperor in advance and used the blood sacrifice to cultivate the heart just to be safe. It could be said that in the previous battle, even if Lin Yu had not planned it in advance, the final victor would still be Lin Yu. He just would not have one so easily. Just as Lin Yu was analyzing the gains from the previous battle, a delicate fragrance wafted over. Then, a delicate figure leaned against his side. Lin Yu opened his eyes and saw Yuja Kitami's fair and delicate face. Clearly, after leaving the Dongsheng Dao domain, Yuji Kitami could not wait to remove her disguise and reveal her original face. "Young Master Qin, you've worked hard today. Let me help you relax," Yuji Kitami said coquettishly. She was even more charming than usual. Looking at Yuji Kitami's red lips, Lin Yu's interest was piqued. Yuji Kitami's face was flushed. Because she could not open her mouth, she could only make muffled sounds. 6 hours later, Yuji Kitami's hair was a little messy. She nestled in Lin Yu's arms like a little bird. Lin Yu smiled faintly and looked out the door thoughtfully. Not far from the house, the blushing Platycodon grandiflorum suddenly panicked. She hurriedly lowered her footsteps and returned to her room. Back in the house, Platycodon grandiflorum heaved a long sigh of relief. Not long after Lin Yu had started, she had inadvertently heard some voices. Driven by curiosity, she had secretly stayed there. She did not expect to listen for so long. "I've heard of that kind of thing." Platycodon grandiflorum touched her hot cheeks and murmured with a flushed face. "Master Qin, why is he so unreasonably strong in that aspect?" Chapter 976. A few days later, the warship entered the territory of the Western region. The Western region worshipped Buddhism, so there were many Buddhist buildings and Buddhist artifacts in the Western region. As soon as they entered the Western region, a Buddhist aura hit them in the face. In the main hall of the warship, Lin Yu and the others were looking out through the light screen. "Is this the Western region? It feels like there are things related to Buddhism everywhere," Yuji Kitami said after observing for a while. Hearing Yuji Kitami's words, Platycodon grandiflorum looked over and remembered what happened before. Her face couldn't help but redden. "What's wrong?" Yuji Kitami looked over curiously. Nothing." Platycodon grandiflorum's face stiffened and quickly said. Lin Yu saw this scene and laughed in his heart. He naturally knew what Platycodon grandiflorum was thinking. The people of the Western region have been educated by Buddhism since young. The atmosphere here is naturally like that. In order to hide her embarrassment, Platycodon grandiflorum quickly changed the topic. I see. It feels like the situation of the 5 regions is completely different from the 4 major families. Each region has its own characteristics. After hearing Platycodon grandiflorum's words, Yuji Kitami wrinkled her nose and said thoughtfully, "The 4 major families were located in the center of the primitive continent. The distance between each of them could be said to be very close. For many years, the 4 major families had influenced each other. In addition to the occasional marriage, there were very few differences between the 4 major families. It could be said that except for the family name of each family and the family martial arts that were forbidden to be taught to outsiders, the 4 major families were basically no different. When facing the forces of other realms, they would still cooperate. Although the 5 regions of the primitive continent belonged to the forces of the primitive continent, the 5 regions were not on the primitive continent. They were 5 small continents that drifted around the primitive continent. They were not connected to each other, so each region had its own culture. Just as Lin Yu and the others were admiring the scenery of the Western region, a thought suddenly locked onto the warship. Although the owner of the consciousness was only at the myriad spirit realm, Lin Yu and the others were on an ordinary warship, which was more than enough to deal with this warship. Under such pressure, the warship's speed gradually decreased. Lin Yu looked out and saw a luxuriously decorated warship in front of him. All kinds of Buddhist tools were hung on the outer edge of the warship, emitting rays of Buddhist light. A few monks stood on the deck of the warship. Although the leader was wearing a golden monk's robe, he didn't have the slightest bit of Buddhist nature. Only a dense blood chi was emitted from his body. What was certain was that the one who had released his aura to lock onto Lin Yu's warship was this man. Perhaps he felt that Lin Yu's warship was slowing down too slowly and didn't stop. The man covered in blood chi frowned and looked unhappy. Blood blades condensed in the man's hand, and he threw them at the warship Lin Yu and the others were on. So. The blood blades brought along bursts of fishy wind as they attacked the warship. Just as they were about to hit the warship, a blue light film appeared on the surface of the warship and enveloped the entire warship, blocking the blood blades. However, due to the effect of the blood blades, the warship finally slowed down. Seeing that the warship had stopped, the man covered in blood chi grinned. "Shumi sect is doing something. Come down for inspection." Hearing the voice from outside the ship, Lin Yu and the others looked a little helpless. They were clearly very low-key, so why would trouble find them wherever they went? "What is the Shumi sect?" Yuji Kitami asked curiously. Platycodon grandiflorum explained, "The full name of the Shumi sect is the Western Shumi sect. It is the largest religion in the Western region and has the most followers. 90% of the people in the entire Western region have joined the Western Shumi sect." Yuji Kitami didn't know the specific situation of the forces in the Western region, but Platycodon grandiflorum, as the ruler of a region, naturally knew very well. What a strange welcome ceremony. Forget it. Since they have already provoked us, let's take care of the Western region. Lin Yu got up and said indifferently. Hearing this, Platycodon grandiflorum suddenly felt a chill. She naturally understood Lin Yu's meaning. Just like in the Demon region and Dongshang Dao region, Lin Yu intended to overturn an entire region by himself, which sounded like a fantasy story. But when it came to Lin Yu, Platycodon grandiflorum had to believe it, because the results of the previous 2 regions were right in front of her. Shaking her head, Platycodon grandiflorum didn't think about it anymore. They followed behind Lin Yu and walked out of the warship together. Seeing the door of the warship open, the man laughed loudly. "You guys are smart. Previously, we met a few guys who hid inside and didn't dare to come out. Now, even the grass on their graves." Before the man finished speaking, he suddenly stopped and his eyes widened. Not only him, but the other monks also widened their eyes. "There's actually such a beauty." The man covered in blood couldn't close his mouth and said with a smile. Noticing the undisguised lust in their eyes, Yuja Kitami and Platycodon grandiflorum were a little angry. What do you want to check? Seeing their ugly behavior, Lin Yu asked calmly. Check. Hearing Lin Yu's question, the man wanted to answer, but immediately said fiercely, There's no need to check. I think you guys are the heretics that the higher-ups are looking for. When the other monks heard the man's words, their eyes lit up and they all agreed. The Lord Saint is right. Seeing how they took so long to come out, I know there's a problem. They must be heretics. Yes, look at those two women. They look so seductive. They must be heretics. Brothers, leave the task of interrogating the heretics to me. I'll definitely make them admit their identities. Dream on, you're dreaming. In an instant, the monks started discussing loudly with evil smiles on their faces. They said this in front of Lin Yu and the others, not taking them seriously at all. Okay, don't dawdle. Hurry up and arrest these people. There's still business to do later. The man who was called the Holy Sun by the others urged with an impatient look on his face. Yes. The monks quickly responded and then walked towards Lin Yu and the others with evil smiles on their faces. Please don't resist. We're searching for heretics under the orders of Lord Sakura. If you resist, you'll be going against Lord Sakura. You know the consequences. Ladies, I'll show you some love later. Hearing these words, Yuja Kitami curled her lips. Disgusting. The monks were stunned and then shouted angrily. What did you say, stinky woman? You'd better pray that you don't fall into my hands. Otherwise, I'll let you have a taste of pain that makes you wish you were dead. Chapter 977. Suddenly, the aura of the 10,000 soul realm erupted. It turned out that other than the Holy Sun from before, the other monks all had the cultivation of the 10,000 soul realm. And in Lin Yu's group, Lin Yu had completely concealed his cultivation, while Platycodon grandiflorum had concealed her cultivation to the 10,000 soul realm. In the eyes of these monks, Lin Yu's group had 3 10,000 soul realm experts. No wonder they still dared to attack in the face of such strength. The monks sped up and formed a pentagram, surrounding Lin Yu and the others. After entering a state of battle, the monks' temperament changed. A Buddhist aura appeared on their bodies, and it was impossible to see their lustful appearance from before. Buddhist scriptures were chanted from their mouths, layer by layer, forming a golden array, trapping Lin Yu and the others inside. The Buddhist voice seemed to be filled with a strange power. When it entered their ears, it immediately turned into a strong impact. Especially Yuja Kitami and Baijio, they had no choice but to cover their ears under this power. But the Buddhist voice seemed to work on spiritual sense. Even if they covered their ears, they still couldn't completely avoid it. After seeing the attack method of these monks, Lin Yu immediately understood the mystery. It turned out that these attacks didn't work on the physical body, but specifically targeted spiritual sense. It was just that the efficiency was extremely low, far from being able to display the actual strength of spiritual sense. After knowing this, Lin Yu lost interest in watching this group of people continue chanting. Shut up, Lin Yu said indifferently, and then an invisible spiritual sense attack was transmitted through his voice. When the monks heard Lin Yu's voice, they laughed in their hearts. You want us to shut up, so we'll shut up? As long as the 2 women were still alive, it didn't matter whether the remaining 2 men were dead or alive. Although they said that they were here to search for heretics under Sakura's orders, they were actually just here to leave the depressing place of Shumi's sect and have some fun. During this period of time, they had used the excuse of searching for heretics to intercept many people. Whenever they met someone with low strength, they would rob them of everything. If there were beautiful women among them, their fates would be even more miserable. As for why they attacked Lin Yu and the others, it was completely because of the beauty of Yuja Kitami and Platycodon grandiflorum that they dared to take the risk and attack 3 myriad soul realm experts. If it were the other 3 10,000 spirit realm experts, they would have lost their resistance in this special formation set up by these monks and would not have been able to fight back at all. However, they had provoked the wrong person this time. Not to mention Lin Yu's abnormal situation. Just the platycodon grandiflorum alone was enough to make them suffer. Suddenly, the voices of the monks stopped. The man who was called the Holy Sun was stunned for a moment before shouting loudly, "What are you guys doing? Don't be lazy." But in the next moment, a scene that sent chills down his spine occurred. The monks' heads seemed to be inflated with air as they exploded one by one. After a moment of silence, 5 headless corpses fell from the sky. Only Lin Yu and the others were still in place, proving that all of this was not an illusion. The Holy Sun opened his mouth wide and made a meaningless sound. These monks were all experts in his Shumi sect. Although they came out with him to carry out a search mission, they were actually more to protect him. Even if he was the Holy Sun, he could barely defeat 1 or 2 of them. If the 5 of them joined forces, he had no chance of winning. But it was precisely these 5 powerful people who had all died in an instant. He didn't even see how the other party attacked. The Holy Sun immediately turned around and wanted to return to the warship and leave immediately. He knew that no matter who attacked just now, he was definitely not that person's match. But the moment he was about to enter the warship, a force suddenly trapped him, causing him to freeze on the spot. Immediately after, the Holy Sun found that the warship was gradually moving away from him, but he immediately reacted. It wasn't the warship that was moving, but himself. Soon, the Holy Sun was controlled by Lin Yu and pulled to his side with a terrified expression. He knew that this time, the other party's strength was far beyond his imagination. If this person wanted to kill him, it would be like squashing an ant. "Sir, I was wrong first. Please let me go. I'm willing to be your slave." After seeing Lin Yu's calm gaze, the Holy Sun suddenly trembled and begged for mercy. "Looking at your bloody appearance, I thought you were a ruthless person." Hearing the begging voice, Lin Yu said disappointedly. The Holy Sun was speechless and didn't know how to explain. Although he was full of murderous aura and was called the Bloody Slaughter Holy Sun in the Western Shumi sect, those he killed were all weaker than him. After all, as the Holy Sun, he had a noble status. Those who were stronger than him were naturally dealt with by others. "I saw that you wanted to touch my woman just now, right?" Lin Yu asked indifferently. Hearing this question, the Holy Sun suddenly panicked and wanted to explain. But Lin Yu naturally wouldn't give him the chance. "Don't worry, you won't die for the time being." The Holy Sun only heard this sentence, and then his vision turned black. When he opened his eyes, he was already tied to a brown wooden stake. For some reason, with his cultivation of the 10,000 spirit realm, he couldn't break free from the seemingly ordinary ropes on his body. "Where is this?" After struggling for a while, the Holy Sun looked around. This was a dark cave, and there wasn't a trace of other people's aura. Could it be that when he was knocked out and hid here, the man planned to kidnap him and ask the Shumi sect for a ransom? This thought popped up in the Holy Sun's mind. Although he had never experienced it, similar things did happen in the Shumi sect in the past. But in the end, those people didn't succeed. Just as the Holy Sun was thinking about how to escape, there was a sudden rustling sound in the cave. Then, a scene that made the Holy Sun tremble in fear happened. A swarm of unknown black insects swarmed out of the tunnels in the cave and crawled toward him. F***CK. The Holy Sun cursed. Although he didn't know these insects, he knew from their appearance that nothing good would happen. Sure enough, the insects were very fast and immediately arrived at the Holy Sun's feet. Then, the Holy Sun saw his feet being submerged by the sea of insects. An unbearable pain came. The veins on the Holy Sun's head bulged, and he let out a miserable howl. For some reason, a message suddenly entered the saint's mind. The message told him that this kind of insect specialized in devouring meat, and when it chewed, it would release an irritating bodily fluid that would increase the prey's perception by several times, and it would also keep the prey awake. After learning this information, the Holy Sun's eyes widened in horror, because he knew that this message didn't lie to him. The sharp pain he was feeling now was caused by that body fluid. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such intense pain when his flesh was being bitten. But immediately, the Holy Sun discovered an even more terrifying phenomenon. Chapter 978. Previously, when the saint tried to break free, he failed. He thought that his cultivation was temporarily sealed. But now, he realized that his wounds were rapidly healing. This recovery speed of the 10,000 soul realm had become a nightmare for him. This caused him to have no choice but to endure even greater pain. But as more and more black worms crawled on his body, the saint was eventually drowned in the sea of worms. After some time, the saint seemed to be awakened and let out a cry of horror. Then, he opened his eyes, and what appeared in front of him was still the cave from before. The saint hurriedly looked at his body. His body was intact without any injuries, but he was still tied up and unable to move. Was that a dream? The saint said in confusion, then shook his head violently. No, that kind of real pain is definitely not a dream. What's going on? The saint looked around. There were large and small tunnels on the nearby walls. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but shiver, because those black worms had crawled out from there. Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded. The saint's face turned pale, then he struggled violently. But the result was the same as before. He couldn't break free from those seemingly ordinary ropes, no matter what. Soon, the scene from before appeared again. He once again felt the feeling of living a life worse than death. When the saint woke up from the cave again, he immediately understood that this place was definitely an illusion created by Lin Yu. But not only would he feel real pain, but he wouldn't really die no matter how many times he died. If he was trapped in this reincarnation cycle, he would have a mental breakdown sooner or later. I was wrong. Please let me go. I beg you, let me out. I don't want to be eaten by those worms again. The saint hurriedly shouted into the air, but his voice echoed in the cave, but there was no response. Soon, the familiar voice sounded again. This was already the third time. Before he died, the saint's heart was filled with deep regret. Why did he offend that person? 5 times. 10 times. After countless reincarnations, the saint's consciousness returned to the outside world. Actually, it had only been less than half an hour since Lin Yu had used his perceptual manipulation technique, but it felt as long as a few years to the saint. He can't be dead, right? Why isn't he moving? Yuja Kitami couldn't help but ask as she looked at the Holy Sun on the ground. In the beginning, the Holy Sun would still struggle fiercely. Later on, the extent of his struggle would become smaller and smaller, and in the end, it was barely noticeable. I won't die, Lin Yu said indifferently. He was the one who created the illusion, so he naturally knew how he set it up. He only controlled the saint's perception and simulated the pain, allowing the saint to continue in that process. Not only would he not die, but if he could persevere, it would also have the effect of training his willpower. However, looking at the saint's current state, it was clear that he had a mental breakdown and did not persist until the end. Perhaps sensing the difference from the previous reincarnation cycle, the saint slowly opened his eyes. After seeing the surrounding scene, although his eyes were slightly dazed, there was still a hint of joy. Lin Yu lowered his body and said to the saint, "How did it feel just now?" Hearing this, the saint recalled what had happened before. Horror appeared on his face, and he immediately retreated. I'll agree to whatever you want. Don't let me in again." The saint shook his head left and right as he shouted loudly. What had just happened was the most terrifying thing he had ever encountered in his life. Lin Yu smiled faintly. "Sure, let the people from the Western Sumeru sect come and save you. If it takes too long, I can't guarantee that you won't experience what happened before again." Lin Yu's goal was to unify the lower Western region, just like the other regions before. Lin Yu had already made up his mind when they were stopped by the saint. Moreover, after finding out how the other monks addressed the saint, Lin Yu thought that he could use the saint's identity to attract all the powerful people from the Western Sumeru sect, saving him the trouble of searching everywhere. The most powerful person in the Western region, Sakura, was ranked 9th on the Divine God list. He was only slightly stronger than Platycodon grandiflorum and could not be compared to the Hautian Emperor. Therefore, for Lin Yu, Even if the most powerful person in the Western region appeared in front of him in the next moment, he did not have to be afraid. On the contrary, it saved him a lot of trouble. Okay. Hearing this, the Holy Sun quickly contacted the Sumer's sect. Although he did not know why Lin Yu took the initiative to let him go and ask for help, he did not dare to hesitate at this time, no matter what Lin Yu asked him to do. After experiencing such a terrifying thing, he did not want to experience it again. Because Lin Yu did not say anything to stop him, the saint recounted everything that had happened here to the Sumer's sect, including the fact that he was no match for Lin Yu, and that those monks had also died at the hands of Lin Yu. After ending the communication, the saint curled up on the ground, not daring to breathe, for fear of attracting Lin Yu's attention and sending him to that terrifying place again. At the same time, in the Western Sumer's sect, in a golden temple, an old monk was sitting at the front. In front of him, 2 rows of monks sat cross-legged, each of them exuding a powerful aura. Great Elder, the other party is looking down on our Sumeru sect. Yes, not only did they capture the saint, but they also told us the news openly. First Elder, let me go. I will definitely bring Lord Holy Sun back safe and sound. The monks sitting cross-legged below were all indignant and eager to try. Just now, they learned from the Great Elder that the saint had been captured, and the other party had taken the initiative to let the saint contact them for help. How much did they not put the Sumeru sect in their eyes? The old monk, who was the Great Elder, coughed lightly after hearing the various statements from below. Suddenly, the temple quieted down, and all the monks looked at the Great Elder. They knew that the Great Elder was about to give an order, and they were quite respectful to the Great Elder. From the saint's words, I can tell that the person who kidnapped the saint is not weak. Otherwise, he would not have been able to kill Hui Zhen and the others so easily. However, no matter how strong he is, he cannot be presumptuous in our Sumeru sect's territory. Speaking of this, the Great Elder suddenly opened his eyes, revealing a golden light. This time, the second elder and the third elder will move together and bring all the disciples above the late stage of the 10,000 spirit realm. We must kill that evil person. Yes. Chapter 979. On the other side, Lin Yu and the others descended from the sky with the Holy Sun and landed on the ground. The Holy Sun noticed the few corpses scattered on the ground and couldn't help but tremble. The monks who protected him before were all at the middle or late stage of the myriad spirit realm. After forming a formation, they could even fight against those at the peak of the myriad spirit realm. But they were killed by Lin Yu so easily. Also, he himself was being played by Lin Yu without being able to fight back. How strong was Lin Yu? At this point, the Holy Sun could only hope that the sect would take his words seriously and send a few more experts here. Due to Lin Yu's deterrence, even if he returned to the ground, the Holy Sun still lay on the ground and didn't dare to get up. Lin Yu and the others were chatting about the situation in the Western region. It seemed that they didn't put the Meru sect in their eyes at all. Seeing this scene, the Holy Sun felt even more uneasy. Are all the monks who cultivate in the Western region like them? Yuji Kitami looked at the Holy Sun's clothes and asked. Platycodon grandiflorum shook her head and explained to her. Of course not. I can only say that most of them are like this, but there are a small number of people who didn't join the Meru sect and don't dress like this. But over the years, the Meru sect has grown larger and larger in the Western region, occupying nearly 90% of the population. I'm afraid that sooner or later, the entire Western region will fall into the hands of the Meru sect. Lin Yu and Bai Jiu were also listening. Bai Jiu asked, didn't the other forces unite to resist the Meru sect? How can they resist? The current strongest person in the Western region, Sakura, is the founder of the Meru sect. The other forces can only be slowly nibbled away. How can they resist? So that's how it is. Hearing this answer, the few of them also understood. The 5 regions were not particularly large in size. Each region was basically ruled by the strongest person in the region. Only a small part of the entire region might not be under their control, but it didn't pose any threat to them and wasn't worth them taking the initiative to eliminate. At this moment, a series of bell chimes suddenly sounded in the air. Then a huge Buddhist light surged from afar. "He's here." Lin Yu looked up at the sky. Although his eyes were filled with golden light, he was still able to see through it and see the silhouettes within. There were 2 Spirit King Realm experts and 13 10,000 Soul Realm experts. Sakura didn't come. Lin Yu smiled faintly. From the other side's formation, he could see that the Sumeru Temple had indeed sent out a high-end combat force, but they had still underestimated his strength. After a few breaths of time, the Buddhist light arrived above Lin Yu and the others before dissipating. A total of 15 monks appeared in front of everyone. "Elder." Seeing the figure above, the saint's face lit up, and he quickly shouted. However, he suddenly remembered that he was still in Lin Yu's hands and immediately shut his mouth. "Second elder, third elder, they actually poisoned Hui Jin's junior brothers. Let this disciple go down and deal with those evildoers to avenge our junior brothers." A burly monk saw the corpses on the ground and suddenly felt a burst of anger. Usually, he was quite close to Hui Jin, so when he saw this scene, he naturally couldn't bear it. When the 2 old monks standing in front heard this, they also looked to the ground. After seeing the corpses, their eyes didn't fluctuate much. After noticing that the saint was only lying on the ground without any injuries, they let out a sigh of relief. Although the saint's strength wasn't the strongest among the many disciples, his talent was definitely the highest in the Western region. Even Lord Sakura had praised him a few times. As long as the saint wasn't injured, this mission was considered a success. As for the casualties of the other disciples, the 2 elders didn't care about it. After all, at their level, the 10,000 Soul Realm was nothing. Only those disciples who had the chance to break through to the Spirit King Realm were worthy of their attention. "Hui Yuan, don't be blinded by anger. These are all the other party schemes," one of the old monks said aloud. He was the second elder. Hearing this, the monk called Hui Yuan hurriedly cupped his fists. "Second elder is right. This disciple has learned his lesson." The other old monk, the third elder, said, "Since they haven't done anything to the saint, why don't we negotiate with them and ask them what they want to do to release the saint?" The most important goal this time was to ensure the safety of the saint. Compared to fighting directly, it was more appropriate to negotiate first to avoid accidentally injuring the saint in the process of fighting. "Excellent." The second elder nodded. Then the group landed in front of Lin Yu and the others. "I don't know why you kidnapped the saint of our sect. If you have any requests, you can ask me," the second elder said slowly. Hearing this, Yuja Kidami couldn't help but speak up. "What do you mean we kidnapped him? He was clearly the one who attacked us first. Who asked him to be inferior and not be our opponent?" "I see. Little girl, as you said, the saint is indeed in the wrong." The second elder nodded and continued. "In that case, the Western Sumeru sect will compensate you. When we bring the saint back, we will also give him the corresponding punishment. What do you think?" Yuja Kitami didn't expect the other party to say this. She was stunned and looked at Lin Yu. Lin Yu smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Seeing this, the second elder turned to Lin Yu. "Young man, are you the leader here? What do you think of the proposal I just made?" Lin Yu didn't answer his question immediately. Instead, he walked to the saint's side and said with a smile, "I can see that he's quite important to you." Hearing this, the second elder's face darkened. Just as he was about to speak, Lin Yu spoke before him. "But I don't care about that. His life is already mine. If you want to save him, exchange the life of another person here for him." After saying that, Lin Yu stretched out a foot and stepped on the saint. Seeing this, the second elder's face became even more gloomy. Although he didn't know Lin Yu's strength from the saint's description, if he really wanted to kill the saint, he probably wouldn't be able to stop him in time. Under such circumstances, it was naturally the best to do as Lin Yu said. After all, the lives of the other disciples weren't as important as the saints. Even if all the disciples he brought this time were to be wiped out, It would be worth it in exchange for the saint's safety. However, the second elder didn't know why Lin Yu would propose this deal. What benefits would it bring to him? Chapter 980. While the second elder was still thinking, Lin Yu stepped on the Holy Sun's body again. The strength this time was far more powerful than before, and it made the Holy Sun's bones creak. The Holy Sun could not help but wail softly. Seeing this, the second elder finally could not help but say hurriedly, "Okay, I agree to your deal." The third elder was not surprised at all and had no objections to this decision. However, the other disciples panicked when they heard this decision. If they really wanted to exchange the Holy Sun, they would definitely choose from these disciples. When they knew that the Holy Sun had been kidnapped, everyone was filled with righteous indignation and wanted to come and rescue him. However, if they were asked to sacrifice their lives in exchange for the safety of others, they were not saints who would sacrifice themselves for others. How could they agree? After saying that, the second elder turned around and looked at the disciples behind him. "Are any of you willing to sacrifice yourselves for the Holy Sun?" As soon as he finished speaking, the scene was silent. Everyone lowered their heads and did not dare to answer. Seeing this, the second elder's face darkened. "Your awareness is still not enough. Forget it. This time let Hui Wu sacrifice his life for the Holy Sun." Hearing this, the monks all heaved a sigh of relief. Only one person panicked, and that was the monk named Hui Wu. "Second elder, why me? My strength is not the weakest. Why not choose them?" Hui Wu was puzzled and questioned. However, the second elder did not pay attention to him at all. He only asked the others to escort him to Lin Yu. Seeing this, Hui Wu knew that no matter what he said, he could not change the second elder's mind. Immediately, his figure flashed and ran away. Although the Shumi sect's influence was spread throughout the entire western region, and no matter where he escaped to, he would eventually be caught and brought back. However, if he escaped this time, at least his life would not be in danger. Second elder, Hui Wu, ran away. The second elder seemed to have expected this and was not surprised at all. Just when Hui Wu had escaped more than 1,000 feet away and thought that he was out of danger, suddenly, a faintly discernible Buddhist voice entered his ears. "This is..." Hui Wu's eyes suddenly fell into confusion, and then he came back to his senses after a sharp pain. When he looked down, he discovered that the tendons on both of his feet had been snapped. Hui Wu still wanted to run away, but under the power of the second elder, he had no chance. His whole body was pulled to Lin Yu's side by a huge force. "I'll use him in exchange." The second elder ignored the screaming Hui Wu and said calmly. Seeing this scene, not only Yuja Kidami and Baijio, but even the disciples of the Shumi temple felt a chill run down their spines. The second elder was actually so ruthless to his own people, even though they knew that all of this was for the sake of the Holy Sun. In the face of such a scene, Lin Yu's expression did not change at all. "All right." Lin Yu nodded and casually tossed the Holy Sun over. On the other side, after the second elder caught the Holy Sun, he immediately used his divine sense to check him. After finding no abnormalities, he breathed a sigh of relief. The Holy Sun's status was noble. If an accident happened, it was likely to attract the wrath of Lord Sakura. At that time, even if they were the elders, they would not be able to avoid the punishment of Lord Sakura. That was why they attached so much importance to the safety of the Holy Sun. Very good. The Holy Sun is not injured. The second elder raised his head and smiled for the first time, and then said gently, "Kill them all." Hearing this sentence, the monks were stunned. Didn't he just say that there would be compensation? Now he directly attacked after the exchange? However, Lin Yu was not the slightest bit surprised in his heart. He had already expected things to develop like this. It was better to say that if the second elder did not attack him, Lin Yu's plan would not have been able to proceed. "Didn't you hear me clearly? I told you to attack." Seeing that the disciples did not respond, the second elder said impatiently. Only then did the monks come back to their senses. One by one, they used all kinds of skills to attack Lin Yu and the others. Because they were all from a Shumi sect, the skills they used were mostly related to Buddhism. Rays of Buddhist light shrouded the entire sky. Facing the overwhelming attack, Lin Yu calmly raised his right hand. Before he broke through, he could crush others in the same realm. For the current him, these people were nothing to be afraid of. Eternal night. In an instant, the monk's eyes became pitch black. Not only that, they also lost their other senses. Time seemed to have frozen at this moment. Dragon Manifestation Fist. Noticing that everyone was frozen in the air, Lin Yu lightly punched out. This time, he did not use the power of time and space overlap. But even so, when a dragon roar sounded, the huge explosion sent all the monks flying. Seeing that their disciples had either fainted or were severely injured and unable to move, the two elders revealed shocked expressions. This person was actually so strong? They knew the strength of their disciples very well. There was no lack of peak 10,000 soul realm existences. Even the elders did not dare to say that they could win with more than 10 people working together. But the other party only used one move to make everyone lose the ability to fight. This person was extraordinarily strong. The second elder knew that in a battle of this level, escaping was meaningless, especially in such an open space. He placed the Holy Sun on the ground and then looked at the third elder beside him. The two looked at each other and nodded. Then, they raised their hands and used Buddhist secret skills to attack Lin Yu. An indescribable Buddhist voice sounded in Lin Yu and the others' ears. What followed was a series of powerful Buddhist techniques. The golden Buddhist light covered the entire land, and all that could be seen was a sea of golden light. Yuji Kitami and the others stood behind Lin Yu with a look of shock. Was this a Buddhist technique? It was far more beautiful than the attacks of other Spirit King realm experts. Even Platycodon grandiflorum was a little surprised. In terms of strength, these two monks were definitely not her match. But she knew a lot of cultivation techniques and the divine abilities passed down from the demon realm. None of them could be as powerful as this one. Young man, from the moment you kidnapped the Holy Sun, your death was already destined. Die. Two heavy Buddhist voices floated over. Then, countless Buddhist techniques fell towards Lin Yu and the others. With a series of roars, the entire space shook. After a dozen breaths, the roars gradually weakened and finally disappeared. Only thick dust was left, covering the place where Lin Yu and the others were. Chapter 981. Looking at the scene before them, the two elders let out a sigh of relief. Although their attacks were powerful, their only weakness was that their attack speed was relatively slow. If the other party was prepared in advance, they could easily dodge it. Fortunately, Lin Yu and the others did not choose to dodge their attacks. At the last moment of the attack, they could see that Lin Yu and the others were still within their attack range and did not escape. With the two of us working together, those people will die without a doubt, the third elder said confidently. Yes. The second elder nodded and did not think that he was bragging, because the attack they released together just now, even if the other party was in the late stage of the Spirit King realm, they would be annihilated. At the very least, they would be seriously injured and lose the ability to fight. And just now, among Lin Yu and the others, 3 of them were in the 10,000 spirit realm. As for the other one, even if he was in the late stage of the Spirit King realm, he would not be able to fight back. In order to verify this idea, the two elders quietly waited for the dust to dissipate. Suddenly, the two of them widened their eyes and felt a chill on their bodies. Ow! How is this possible? The third elder shouted in disbelief. Even the second elder, who had been very calm, lost his composure and muttered to himself, "Who are you?" In front of them, Lin Yu and the others were not only unharmed, but there was not even a trace of dust on their bodies. Instead, looking at the dust on the two elders, the two of them looked like they were the ones being attacked. Just this? Lin Yu smiled faintly. The attacks released by the two just now were indeed very powerful and could defeat a late stage of the Spirit King realm. If the Platycodon grandiflorum did not use all her strength to resist, she might have been killed in one move. But unfortunately, they met Linyu. In the face of that attack, Linyu only used Illusory Sky at the last moment and used Azura to block all the attacks. After breaking through to the Spirit King realm, Lin Yu's divine ability had reached a terrifying level. When Lin Yu and the others were resisting the attacks in Azura, the Platycodon grandiflorum was already shocked beyond words. Previously, she had thought that the attacks of the two monks were a little beyond their realm, but when she saw Lin Yu, she realized that they were just child's play compared to him. Am I too weak? From today onwards, I must work hard to cultivate. After being provoked, the Platycodon grandiflorum could not help but think to herself. Back to the present, when the two elders heard Lin use mockery, their eyes filled with killing intent. How many years? No one dared to disrespect. But today, they were actually being mocked by a young man. Anger rose in their hearts. The two of them took out their Buddhist staffs and rushed towards Lin Yu. Although Lin Yu could block their combined attack, it would not be as easy as it looked. It would definitely consume a large amount of glory energy. Mocking them now was just an act. The second elder thought to himself and transmitted his voice to the third elder at the same time. Suddenly, the two of them became more confident, as if they could see the hope of victory. Seeing the two of them rushing towards him again, Lin Yu was stunned. Did they not realize the difference in strength? However, Lin Yu immediately guessed their thoughts. In that case, I'll let you feel the true difference in strength. Lin Yu smiled faintly and moved to meet them. The strength and speed of a Spirit King realm expert had reached an extremely terrifying level. The three of them gathered and immediately began to fight. Amongst the others present, only Beimayuer was able to see their movements clearly, whereas Beimayuer and Bai Jiu were barely able to keep up with their movements. If there were people with lower strength present, they would only be able to see after images and would not be able to catch their movements. After a few breaths, there were a few muffled grunts. The two elders were sent flying one after another. One of the third elder's arms had already disappeared. The wound had already turned black and solidified, and there was no blood flowing out. During the fight, he used a palm technique to try to control Lin Yu. Unexpectedly, Lin Yu was not restrained, but his arm was torn off in an instant by a huge force. The two of them stood together, panting heavily as they looked forward with fear. It was only after this fight that they clearly knew that they were no match for Lin Yu. On the other side, Lin Yu landed on the ground, still looking calm. He was not panting heavily, and there was not even a drop of sweat on his body. Damn it! The second elder cursed angrily. At this point, no matter how stupid he was, he knew that they were no match for Lin Yu. In the previous fight, if Lin Yu wanted to kill them, they would not have survived until now. Although they did not know why Lin Yu did not kill them, more importantly, they were now in a difficult situation. They could not defeat Lin Yu, and they could not leave this place. Lin Yu not only crushed them in terms of strength, but also in terms of speed. Facing such an enemy, running away was the stupidest thing to do. The second elder calmly took out a jade pendant and quietly crushed it in his palm. A weak light appeared and disappeared into the distance without attracting anyone's attention. After doing all this, the second elder breathed a sigh of relief. He had already sent the situation here back to the Western Sumer sect, and Lin Yu did not know about the matter of him sending the message, so he would not kill them for the time being. The two of them only needed to wait for Lord D. Shurtion to come to rescue them. This time, the second elder did not make the mistake of underestimating the enemy and directly sent a request for help to D. Shurtion. If he sent the request for help to others, even if the great elder came, according to his previous observation, even if the three of them joined forces, they would not be Lin Yu's opponent. Now, there was only one person who could deal with Lin Yu, and that was Lord D. Shurtion. As long as the opponent was still within the range of the Spirit King realm, Lord D. Shurtion would not fail. Thinking of this, The second elder could not help but feel a little relieved and passed this news to the third elder. The two of them stood together, staring at Lin Yu's every move, in case he suddenly made a move. Lin Yu, who was standing on the other side, smiled slightly. Just now, the action that the second elder thought was deceiving him was completely exposed in his eyes. Everything was going according to his plan. The next one to come should be the strongest person in the Western domain, Tion. In this way, the strongest people in the Western domain would all be gathered here. At that time, these people would be dealt with together, and the Western domain would fall into his hands. Lin Yu did not continue to make a move and waited with the two elders. But the people they were waiting for were different. One was the reinforcements, and the other was the enemy. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.